Carol Clark was born in Yate, England, to her parents Peter and Phyllis Clark in 1961. By the young age of 17, she had left home and moved to Bristol, England to work at a hotel. Sadly, Carol would be addicted to heroin and crack. By the time she was 20, she was selling her body on the streets to make money for her addiction. This continued into her early 30s before her life was taken at the hands of a killer. While Carol's family was unaware of the type of work she did, her boyfriend, Christopher Myler, fully accepted it. On March 26, 1993, 32-year-old Carol left a note at home for a boyfriend stating that she was going to look for work on the streets of Bristol. She wore a black baseball cap, brown leather jacket, blue denim miniskirt, black polo neck jumper, and plain blue t-shirt. When 2 days went by with no word from Carol, her boyfriend grew worried. It was 2 days later, on Sunday, March 28th, that her body was discovered by a dog walker at around 4 p.m. Carol's body was hidden under plant growth off the Gloucester and Sharpness Canal. Carol was partially clothed, and her neck appeared to be broken. Most of the clothes she wore the night she went missing have never been found. It was confirmed via autopsy that Carol had been strangled to death and her neck broken. Foreign DNA evidence was collected from her body, where it was confirmed she had been violated. The evidence was stored away until technology was advanced enough to match the DNA to a suspect. A large-scale murder investigation was launched upon the discovery of Carol's body, but decades would go by before any arrest would be made. As a female sex worker, Carol could have met with anybody on the night of her murder. She could have met with multiple people in one night, making it even more difficult to narrow down a suspect in her case. Over the years, investigators met with serial killers that had been caught, hoping to link Carol's case to them. Among those questioned include Alon Kite, who received a sentence of life in prison at the age of 35 for the murder of 2 prostitutes, Samuel Paul and Tracy Turner, who were strangled and dumped at the side of country lanes in Leicestershire. Additionally, Philip John Smith was questioned by police about Carol's disappearance after he was found to have killed 3 prostitutes, Carol Jordan, Jody Hyde, and Rosemary Concochran, in Birmingham in November 2000. But none of the interviewed killers could confirm that Carol was one of their unfortunate victims. After years and years went by, with little else to go off of, Carol's case went cold. Detective Chief Inspector Wayne Murdoch would later describe the investigation as the most challenging murder investigation in his career. It wasn't until 30 years after the discovery of Carol's body in 2023 that the Gloucestershire police officers, as a part of the Southwest Major Crime Investigation Team, would reopen the case. Luckily, detectives preserved DNA evidence from the scene of the crime that would be used to unlock a key piece of the puzzle. On April 14, 2023, a 66-year-old man from Gloucestershire was arrested for the murder of Carol Clark. No further information reveals the name of the individual, as the investigation is still ongoing. Detective Chief Inspector Wayne Usher said, "We are determined to get answers and justice for Carol's family, and this arrest is a positive development in our ongoing investigation." Middletown is the largest city in Orange County, New York. Living in Middletown offers residents a dense suburban feel. Middletown has an overall crime rate of 12 per 1,000 residents, making the crime rate near the average for all cities and towns of all sizes in America. But on a cold night in March of 2003, a horrific crime would be committed. On March 13, 2003, 20-year-old Megan McDonald ended her shift at the American Cafe in the Galleria Mall in Orange County, New York. Megan was the daughter of a police detective, and she was hardworking and dedicated in every aspect of her life. according to family and friends. On top of that, she was kind-hearted, generous, and a friendly person. If a friend or family member was in trouble, Mebane would be the first to arrive to help. Her family doted on her, and she was the apple of their eye. Shortly after her shift ended at the cafe, Mebane was seen getting money from an ATM at the very mall she worked in. Around 7 p.m., she drove by a party that her friends were hosting at Greenway Terrace. At that time, they invited her to come in, but she declined, saying she was going to hang out with other friends in Middletown. By 7:30, she had arrived at her other friend's house and spent time together talking, eating, and watching the show Friends on the television. By midnight, Mebane said she had to go home since she had to be up early the next morning for another shift at work. At 12:15 a.m. on August 14, 2003, Mebane was seen arriving back at the Green Terrace party that she had earlier declined to enter. It was unclear why she made her way back to this party, but investigators believe her killer was at this party. Rather than entering the party, Mebane simply drove by, perhaps stopping just to chat with a few friends there. She soon drove off and was seen entering the parking lot of her own apartment complex, the Kensington Manor Apartments. Video surveillance showed that Mebane's car was being followed by a dark hatchback, blasting loud music.
The night of the homicide, when it was being followed by a dark color, either Honda Civic hatchback, dark in color, or a hatchback-style vehicle with a very loud sound system.
It was noticed that her car was found the next morning, parked erratically in the back of the parking lot, likely indicating Mebane knew she was being followed and tried to park her car and rush to her apartment as quickly as she could. Mebane would never make it back to her apartment. For over 24 hours, no one knew what had become of her. But then, at 1 p.m. the following day, on March 15, 2003, Mebane's lifeless body was discovered by a man on a secluded trail off of Bowser Road. Investigators believe she was killed in the early hours of March 14th, after driving by the Green Terrace party. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. Over the course of 20 years, detectives would do their best to piece together the events of the night of her death and collect evidence to find her killer and put them behind bars. The website justiceformebane.com was started by her loved ones and helped to paint the picture of the night she was murdered. With Mebane's own father being a police detective, the case never truly went cold. For 20 years, police worked diligently to solve her case. Over the years, flyers were sent out and billboards were posted on busy highways, encouraging anyone with information to come forward. Investigators also continued to collect evidence over the next 2 decades, which included physical evidence, DNA evidence, and new technology that came out following 2003 that they were finally able to utilize. It was all of this evidence combined that finally put a name to Mebane's killer in 2023. Edward V. Holley, who was already behind bars for unrelated charges, was charged with Mebane's murder. According to police, Holley remained on the radar over the years as a prime suspect and was in fact interviewed 4 times over the course of the investigation, although not enough evidence was in place for an arrest until 2023. With the large advancement in DNA technology from the year 2003 to 2023, Holley would finally be arrested and charged. Holley was an ex-boyfriend of Mebane's, according to the police. Police learned that only a few days prior to her murder, the pair had broken up. The original thought that the murder was a crime of opportunity between strangers began to turn. In light of the arrest, it is believed that the crime was intimate partner violence related to the breakup. It is also noted in police reports that Holley owed Mebane a substantial amount of money, another motive that drove him to murder. As of May 2023, the investigation remains ongoing, and more information will come to light during and after the trial. Mebane McDonald, a hard-working, generous woman, had her life taken away too early. But thanks to the diligent efforts of the Orange County Police, she can finally begin to receive the justice that she deserves. Megan's family and friends are at peace, knowing that the monster who took their daughter away will now be held accountable. San Diego is the 8th most populous state in the United States and the 2nd most populous city in California. Back in 1977, Frank Botts, a Marine Corps veteran in his early 60s, lived there and was a loving father to 3 children. Alongside his paternal duties, he managed Botts' Gift Shop, a quaint establishment located in the heart of College Grove, San Diego. Life seemed to be going well, until tragedy struck out of the blues. On April 2, 1977, Frank's life was abruptly cut short. His lifeless body was discovered in a secluded room at the rear of his cherished store, bearing the scars of a violent demise. He had been stabbed. Frank had been working alone at the time of the incident. News of the crime spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of determined detectives who swiftly descended upon the crime scene. They carefully searched every inch of the store, lifting fingerprints from various surfaces. In addition to this, they also found a rare hat, which they believed had been left behind by whoever had taken Frank's life. After all of this evidence was collected, the pursuit of justice began in earnest. However, no matter how tirelessly the detectives pursued leads, interviewed witnesses, and searched for clues, their efforts seemed to be met with a frustrating silence. Frank's killer, like a ghost in the night, remained elusive, casting a chilling shadow over the investigation. The case gradually grew cold, leaving Frank's grief-stricken relatives to grapple with an agonizing question that haunted their every waking moment. Who among the countless faces in their lives held the dark secret of Frank's untimely demise? In 2021, a new generation of detectives reopened the case and continued the investigation. Multiple DNA samples were carefully collected and dispatched to 5 different laboratories for analysis. 4 of these labs were situated in San Diego, while the 5th was located in Texas. The collaborative effort between the labs and law enforcement agencies held the promise of shedding light on the truth that had eluded justice for so long. The elusive puzzle pieces began to fall into place as DNA analysis was conducted on the rare hat discovered at the crime scene and some carefully collected fingernail scrapings from Frank's body back in 1977. Remarkably, both sets of DNA yielded a conclusive match to a fingerprint that had been lifted from a glass countertop in Frank's store. And finally, the suspect had a name: Norman Lamont Jones. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Unbelievably, at the time of Frank's murder, Jones was a mere 16 years old, his youth contrasting starkly with the gravity of the crime. The realization that a teenager could be responsible for such an act left everyone grappling with the realization of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul. Taking a closer look at Norman's background, it became evident that his journey into criminality commenced at the tender age of 14 and persisted throughout his adult life. Norman constantly found himself in and out of jail. Tragically, his life came to an abrupt end in November 1991, during a shooting following a robbery in a shopping center called Fashion Valley. The gripping sequence of events unfolds as follows. Upon receiving reports of an armed robbery, 5 police officers swiftly surrounded Norman in the parking lot of Fashion Valley. Encircled by law enforcement and with a police helicopter hovering above, Norman remained in his car, his right hand concealed. He was given clear instructions to surrender, yet the tension in the air grew thick. Norman eventually emerged from his vehicle, brandishing what appeared to be a real weapon. In response, the officers, fearing for their safety, opened fire, fatally striking Norman. It was later revealed that the object he wielded was in fact a toy gun. When the detectives later reached out to inform Frank's children that their father's killer had been identified, they were in disbelief. Among them, John Botts struggled to process the information.
None of us thought after 46 years that anything would ever come of it, so we were all a little surprised at that.
As the weight of the news settled in, John found a glimmer of solace in the fact that the man believed to have taken his father's life, Norman, was no longer alive.
Fortunately, after 1991, nobody would ever lose their life because of him.
This knowledge of the killer's fate provided some closure for the grieving family. They were grateful for the resolution. However, they remained haunted by the realization that they could never confront the person who had inflicted such pain and loss. Montreal is the largest city in Canada's Quebec province. It is set on an island in the St. Lawrence River, and named after Mount Royal, the triple-peaked hill at its heart. It inhabits many boroughs, most of which were once independent cities with a somewhat low crime rate. But despite that, one of the most painful incidents occurred in the city on June 6, 1996, where Patricia Ferguson, a young mother, was taken away from her infant daughter forever. The details about Patricia's death and early stages of life still remain uncertain, but it is known that she was outdoorsy and by June 1996 had become a loving and dedicated mother to an 11-month-old daughter who was born sometime in 1995. It all happened on the night of June 6, 1996. Patricia was sleeping over at a friend's house. In the middle of the night, she left the residence and went to meet someone, leaving behind her young daughter, Sabrina. At the time, Patricia was 23 years old, while Sabrina was only 11 months old. Patricia was never heard from again. By the following day, Patricia had been reported missing, and the authorities were already working on the case. The police figured out that Patricia was last seen sometime on the night of June 6, 1996, in Montreal's Pointe-aux-Trembles, a nearby neighborhood. Before she went missing, another important piece of information came from Patricia's friend, whose place Patricia was staying at that night. The friend gave the police a note, which was left behind by Patricia for her. In the note, Patricia said that she was going to get something to eat and then would visit her sister. An extensive search for Patricia was implemented. Detectives spent long hours questioning the witnesses and looking for any traces that Patricia might have left behind. But the investigation only led to dead ends. Patricia was still nowhere to be found. The Sun Youth Organization, a registered charity that provided a wide range of emergency and community services, offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Patricia being found. But sadly, no one came forward, and the reward went unclaimed. The case remained open for quite some time, until it ultimately went cold. Patricia was never found. The case was reopened in December 2022. The Montreal police set up a command post seeking information from the public about Patricia's disappearance. The command post was set up at Notre Dame Street and 56th Avenue, the area where Patricia was last seen. A forensics team was assigned to the location to find information on the circumstances surrounding her alleged disappearance. Montreal police said that the effort was based on new facts uncovered over the past few months, also assuring the public that there were new leads in the case. The information was reportedly based on a documentary by Nouveau that examined Patricia's disappearance in detail. The true crime documentary was done through a partnership with Unsolved Murders and Missing Cases of Quebec, a group that supports families of missing people, and Nouveau infojournalist Marie-Christine Bergeron. After the series began airing in December 2022, police sent the team back to Pointe-aux-Trembles to reopen the case. They gave new facts that we didn't have in 1996, said Lieutenant Detective Sébastien Levesquois. Through the documentary, the police learned in which apartment Patricia spent the night before she went missing. People close to Patricia had suspicions about a man she knew. They told them that they had seen her downtown hanging out with a junkie. 2 women were interviewed for the documentary, said that the man had tried to sell his car after Patricia disappeared and had it scrapped despite it being in good condition. It took nearly 3 decades, but the police arrested the alleged culprit in relation to Patricia's case. He was a man with prior convictions for violent crimes. The detectives found out that Patricia was killed. The Montreal police had no idea that the 23-year-old woman's disappearance in 1996 wasn't a disappearance at all, but a homicide. Now, almost 27 years later, Montreal police arrested 69-year-old man named Serge Audouet in connection with Patricia's disappearance. The events that led to his arrest were kept shielded by the publication ban. Montreal Police Media Liaison, Officer Jean Drouin, had to tell reporters and camera operators that a planned press conference in the missing person case of Patricia Ferguson was canceled after the defense lawyer asked for a publication ban. Serge was arrested on Thursday, June 1, 2023, and appeared in court on Friday, June 2, 2023, to be charged. Patricia's daughter Sabrina, now an adult, watched as Serge Audouet was charged at the Montreal courthouse with killing Patricia Ferguson on June 6, 1996. He was charged with manslaughter when he made his first court appearance before Quebec court judge Thierry Nadon. "I'm completely relieved that justice can be done for my mom. I'm happy," Sabrina Ferguson said after Serge Audouet appeared through a video conference call.
"I'm feeling relieved that somebody can be arrested for what's been done to my mom."
She also stated that she was just 11 months old when her mother was taken away from her.
It's hard to construct a self-esteem because you're like, if my mom didn't like me, who else is going to like me?
So she grew up without knowing her mother, without knowing where she was. It was devastating for her to know that something like that happened to her mother. But she also felt relieved, knowing that her mother wanted to come back to her, but she just couldn't. Serge, Patricia's killer, would make another court appearance on June 12, 2023. There was a brief publication ban on Serge, Patricia, and Sabrina's identities, but eventually it was lifted. Sabrina told CTV News that she thought her mother had abandoned her. For more than 2 decades, Sabrina was under the false impression her mother was missing. She said that her only regret was that she never got to tell her mother that she loved her.
I just don't know. I can feel angry at times against him. I can feel just sad about the whole situation.
For 27 years, nearly her entire life, Sabrina had only wanted to know what happened to her mother that night. And now she finally did. The latest developments in this case helped Sabrina move on with her life and get some closure. East Windsor is a township located in Mercer County, New Jersey. Situated in the central part of the state, it is known for its suburban character and proximity to major cities like Trenton and Princeton. East Windsor offers a blend of residential areas, commercial centers, and natural landscapes. The township is home to various parks, recreational facilities, and cultural attractions, providing residents and visitors with ample opportunities for outdoor activities and community engagement. But despite this idyllic setting, this place would become the home of a heinous crime. Donna Dee Macho's journey began on October 16, 1964, in the town of East Windsor, nestled within Mercer County. She was the cherished daughter of Betty Lou Thompson Macho and Ronald Wayne Macho. As the years went by, Donna's family expanded with the arrival of her younger sister, Julie Macho, in 1969. Life took a turn when their mother, Betty, found love again and married a man named Garland. Together they formed a blended family. Donna and Julie embraced their new life with their beloved stepfather by their side. Donna Macho had a zest for life that radiated through her love for cooking and sewing. Alongside her job as a legal secretary, she harbored dreams of a career in modeling. For Julie, Donna was a shining star. Despite the challenges that came her way, Donna never lost her sparkle and continued to embrace life with open arms. Little did she know that her path would take an unexpected and tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those who cherished her. On February 25, 1984, it seemed like a typical Saturday night for 14-year-old Julie Macho, who was relaxing at her family's home in East Windsor. When she noticed her 19-year-old sister, Donna Dee Macho's car parked outside, she joined her in the basement. Together they spent the night watching scary movies until 2 a.m. At that point, Julie went upstairs to her bed, ready to rest for the night. Their mother Betty and stepfather Garland were peacefully asleep upstairs during that time. They were unaware of any unusual sounds or disturbances emanating from the basement. The following day, on February 26, 1984, Donna was expected to go to work at a law firm, so her absence during the day didn't initially raise alarm bells. However, as dinner time arrived and Donna still hadn't returned home, her mother began to worry. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Betty decided to investigate by venturing downstairs to check the basement apartment. As Betty entered Donna's usually neat and organized apartment, she was greeted by a disarray of items scattered about. It was evident that a struggle had taken place within those walls. The sight of blood-stained clothes heaped together heightened her growing unease, prompting her to immediately contact the police. Once the police arrived at the scene, they meticulously combed through the entire basement, their eyes keenly scanning for any trace that could unravel the mystery. Their diligence paid off when they discovered faint fingerprints near a table close to the bed. Recognizing the potential significance of these fingerprints, they carefully collected them as evidence, alongside the blood-stained clothes. They also uncovered traces of bodily fluid in the bedroom, an essential clue that held the promise of leading them closer to the identity of the perpetrator and help in finding Donna. In the search for answers, investigators made a grim discovery. In March 1984, when they found Donna Macho's abandoned blood-stained car near a sewer plant roughly a mile away from her home. However, despite this lead, the mystery surrounding her disappearance endured. Investigators meticulously combed through countless records. They diligently interviewed the residents living in the vicinity of Donna Macho's residence, determined to unearth any clue that could lead them to the truth. As fate would have it, the investigation took a significant turn when they suspected a number of people, including Nathaniel Harvey, a former worker at a nearby farm and resident of East Windsor. He had been apprehended and detained for his alleged involvement in a series of assaults and a chilling murder in the Plainsboro area. But all the leads, including Harvey, did not pan out at that time. The significant piece of evidence, the bodily fluid that investigators found in Donna Macho's bedroom, also went for testing. However, the technology for DNA testing was not as advanced as it is today, and the testing conducted at that time lacked the precision needed to pinpoint the source of the bodily fluid. But the investigators didn't close the case in hope that one day they would come up with some solid leads that would help them solve Donna Macho's murder mystery. The weight of the tragedy became too much for Donna's stepfather, who tragically passed away just 6 months after Donna vanished, leaving the family to bear the weight of their grief alone. The family went to great lengths in their search for the killer. They hired private investigators, trackers, and even sought the help of psychics. They poured all their resources into the effort, spending every last penny they had. Their hope never wavered. They held on to the belief that somehow, maybe, just maybe, their loved one was still alive. They couldn't shake the thought that perhaps she was injured. After exhausting all possible avenues to finding the identity of the killer, seeking solace and a fresh start, Julie and her mother made the difficult decision to move to Texas in 1987. However, their journey to healing was further marred by misfortune when their storage unit was burglarized, robbing them of precious memories. The thieves callously snatched away family photos, cherished mementos, and 16 boxes filled with investigation files, adding another layer of pain. 11 years went by, but there was no news. But on April 2, 1995, police officers got a call from a Boy Scout troop about a body they found near Cranberry. It was not in good condition, almost completely decomposed, but when they got the dental records back, they couldn't believe they had found the most important part of the puzzle they had been searching for the last decade. It was the body of Donna Dee Macho, concealed within a carpet in a wooded area near a cranberry farm, not far from where her car had been recovered. After her remains were sent for an autopsy, initial findings indicated that Donna had tragically suffered a gunshot wound to the head. However, as the case investigation progressed, the dedicated experts at the Middle Assault Regional Medical Examiner's Office delved deeper into her remains. Through careful examination, they discovered that her cause of death was indeed a head injury, although it couldn't be definitively determined as a gunshot wound. Nevertheless, the cause of death was amended to evidence of homicidal violence, and her death continued to be classified as a homicide. With this crucial lead unable to yield conclusive results, the investigation gradually reached a standstill, and the case eventually fell into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. In February 2022, Mercer County Prosecutor Angelo Onofre directed the reopening of the Donna Macho case. The case was handed over to the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability Central Regional Cold Case Task Force, a dedicated group within the statewide cold case network established by the New Jersey Attorney General in 2019. As part of the reopened investigation, all relevant physical evidence, including DNA samples, was carefully resubmitted to the state police's Central Regional Laboratory. This step aimed to leverage advanced forensic techniques and technology in the pursuit of truth and justice. Modern DNA technology played a crucial role in shedding new light on the case. The evidence, the bodily fluid which was found from Donna Macho's bedroom, was carefully re-examined, and it conclusively matched the DNA profile to Nathaniel Harvey. Astonishingly, his DNA was the only genetic material found in the room that should not have been present, according to the Attorney General's office. It was a breakthrough that provided clarity and closure to the long-standing mystery. Nathaniel Harvey, born in 1942 in East Windsor, had a troubled past right from the beginning. He had a knack for trouble and found himself behind bars for most of his life. In 1968, he got married, but the identity of his wife is not known. Living in East Windsor, Harvey had a long list of crimes to his name. He was also described as a daring intruder by the West Windsor police, and he had been convicted of assault. It was said that during his crimes, Harvey would sneak into unlocked homes, where he would take young women hostage and commit acts of violence. The authorities always had their eyes on him, considering him a potential suspect in their search for justice. One such case was of Irene Schnapps, who was also a resident of East Windsor. During the years of 1984 and 1985, the local authorities were faced with a growing concern as a series of burglaries rattled Plainsboro, West Windsor, and nearby neighborhoods. The authorities were also grappling with the unsolved murder of Irene Schnapps and the perplexing disappearance of Donna Macho, who vanished from her family's East Windsor home. 16 months after Donna Macho's disappearance, tragedy struck again in East Windsor when Irene Schnapps, a 37-year-old woman who had recently lost her husband to cancer, was killed. The incident occurred overnight on Saturday, June 15, 1985, or in the early hours of the following day. Concerned for her well-being, one of Irene's colleagues at RCA Malcom went to her apartment the next morning on June 16, 1985, on Research Way after she failed to show up for work. With trembling hands, he informed the police about the tragic scene that he had encountered. Inside the apartment, a heart-wrenching sight awaited the investigators. Irene Schnapps suffered a barrage of over 15 vicious blows to her head, inflicted by an axe or hatchet. The room bore gruesome evidence of the tragedy, with Irene's lifeless body lying unclothed in her blood-soaked bedroom. Amidst the chilling scene, a crimson-stained footprint on a pillowcase was discovered, becoming a vital clue that held the potential to unlock the mystery behind her tragic demise. Peter Stowasser, a 41-year-old man, stepped forward to share his account with the investigators. As a friendly acquaintance of Irene Schnapps, he revealed that he may have been the last person to have seen her alive. Shortly after sharing his connection to Irene Schnapps, Stowasser's life took an unexpected turn. The police began frequent visits to his doorstep, and one Saturday, June 17, 1985, Stowasser found himself taken to the Middle Assault Prosecutor's Office, where he spent the entire day under intense scrutiny, facing a barrage of questions regarding Irene's tragic murder. He confessed to developing feelings of attraction towards her, envisioning a potential romantic connection. However, Irene, still grieving the loss of her husband, expressed the need for time and space before considering any new relationships. As Stowasser eagerly anticipated the right moment to express his romantic feelings, he maintained a friendly connection with Irene. He extended invitations to his lively gatherings, hosting barbecues for neighbors and friends in an effort to ensure she didn't feel alone. However, their potential relationship was abruptly shattered when Irene met her tragic end, casting suspicion upon Stowasser as the primary suspect. Law enforcement also obtained a search warrant for Stowasser's residence. During the search, they discovered a quilt that bore suspicious-looking stains, possibly blood-related. Additionally, from his car, investigators seized a pair of white work gloves and a metal strip exhibiting reddish spots. Upon conducting tests on the quilt, it was revealed to contain human blood, accompanied by hairs that seemed to match those of the victim. Stowasser, however, maintained that the stains on the quilt originated from menstrual blood belonging to another woman he was involved with. As the investigation progressed, Stowasser underwent a lie detector test, which he did not pass, although the results of such tests were not considered admissible in court. Additionally, it came to light that he had a history of serving time in jail for stalking a former girlfriend. However, the police eventually eliminated Stowasser as a primary suspect, largely due to a significant discrepancy in shoe sizes. Stowasser wore size 12 shoes, whereas a bloody footprint at the crime scene indicated a size 6 shoe. This unexpected mismatch in foot size shifted the focus of the investigation elsewhere. However, on October 28, 1985, the breakthrough in the case occurred. On that very day, Nathaniel Harvey embarked on a rampage through the southern part of West Windsor, ultimately leading to a significant turning point in the investigation. The initial call that reached the dispatch center reported an alarming incident in Dutch Neck Estates. It was a chilling account of a 13-year-old girl who had narrowly escaped an attempted abduction from her own home, and the man covered her mouth in an attempt to take her away. However, her bravery prevailed as she managed to free herself and let out a piercing scream, alerting her parents to the danger. Startled by the commotion, he fled the scene. After fleeing the home in Dutch Neck Estates, that man broke into another house, probably to hide from the police. He was confronted by the homeowner. He turned on the light and saw Nathaniel Harvey standing there threatening him with an axe. Sensing the imminent danger, Harvey swiftly pivoted, shattering the glass door with a powerful swing of the axe, and ran off into the woods. With a chilling affinity for axes, Harvey had developed a disturbing pattern of wielding these menacing tools to instill fear in his victims. Even when armed with a knife during one of the assaults he committed, he deceitfully claimed to possess an axe, further fueling the terror. It wasn't lost on the astute law enforcement officials that the murder weapon used in the Irene Schnapps killing was believed to be an axe, adding another haunting connection to Harvey's modus operandi. A short time later, investigators diligently canvassed the area, and their sharp eyes caught sight of Harvey traversing a soybean field, and then ran off into the woods. The police swiftly descended upon the scene, converging on Harvey's location near the Princeton Arms shopping center. It was there at the intersection of Old Trenton Road and Dorchester Drive that a state trooper apprehended Harvey. During questioning, police learned of the extent of Harvey's one-man crime spree. He confessed to a string of burglaries that had struck fear into the community. However, the extent of his depravity became even more harrowing as it revealed the details of a recent assault. Prior to the tragic murder of Irene, Harvey had abducted a young girl from East Windsor, forcefully taking her to an abandoned building nestled along Dutch Neck Road. He revealed that the victim, who was actually Donna Macho, innocently stepped out onto her deck to indulge in a cigarette, only to be seized by his relentless grip. After Harvey's arrest, the 13-year-old girl was called to identify if Harvey was the man who attacked her on October 28, 1985. Through her courageous testimony, she ultimately identified Harvey as her assailant. The authorities made a difficult decision not to pursue charges in the case due to the extremely brutal and perverse nature of the attack, considering the potential impact it would have on the victim's well-being. However, a breakthrough came when investigators finally received the search warrant and conducted a thorough search of Harvey's car in November 1985, which was located in the Princeton Arms apartment complex. Inside, they uncovered compelling evidence directly linking him to the Irene Schnapp's murder. Alongside stolen items from various recent burglaries, a significant discovery was made: a Seiko watch that was positively identified as belonging to Irene and having been taken from her apartment at the time of the tragic murder. This crucial find provided a solid connection between Harvey and the crime. In an intriguing twist, it was discovered that Harvey's wife resided in the same apartment complex as Irene. However, this information had to be kept confidential due to his wife's reliance on state assistance. Additionally, authorities asserted that Harvey initially admitted to the murder of Irene during his questioning at the West Windsor Police Headquarters, where he was confronted with various matters. It was during this intense moment that Harvey requested to speak with his father, who offered him crucial advice to do the right thing. In a surprising turn of events, Harvey then made a confession regarding the Irene Schnapp's murder. Following Harvey's apprehension, the quilt that had been seized from Stowasser, the neighbor of Irene, who was also seen as a person of interest in the murder, was returned to him. Additionally, the glove and metal strip confiscated from his car underwent testing by prosecutors, revealing negative results for the presence of blood. In 1986, Harvey was convicted for the murder of Irene Schnapp's. However, 4 years later in 1990, the state Supreme Court overturned his conviction, stating that his confession had been obtained without properly informing him of his Miranda rights. Harvey, who now maintained that his confession was coerced, immediately retracted his statement. This turn of events raised concerns about the validity of his initial confession and ignited a debate about whether he should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after speaking with his father. The question of Harvey's confession became a point of contention as conflicting accounts emerged. According to Evan Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, he denied confessing to the murder of Irene, contradicting the police's assertion that he had admitted to the crime, even though the confession was not recorded. The initial conviction was overturned based on the court's ruling that Harvey should have been reminded of his Miranda rights after requesting to speak to his father during questioning. In 1994, as the case went to a second trial, the focus shifted to the crucial evidence of blood found at the crime scene. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that revealed genetic traits matching both Harvey's blood sample and the stains on a box spring in Irene Schnapp's apartment. The DNA testing, although still in its early stages, indicated that Harvey could not be ruled out as a contributor. To further strengthen their case, prosecution experts utilized dot intensity analysis, a technique that estimated the consistency between the blood characteristics found at the scene and Harvey's DNA. They determined that such a match would occur in only 1 out of every 1,400 African American individuals. However, The defense experts countered, arguing that the ratio could potentially be as low as 1 in 50. This time, Harvey was convicted and received the death sentence. However, this verdict was upheld by a divided state Supreme Court in 1997, with some justices expressing differing views. Justice Alan B. Handler, in his dissenting opinion, carefully scrutinized the 64-page analysis of the DNA testing presented in the case. He voiced his doubts and expressed confidence that at some point in the future, either the state or federal court would likely reverse the decision. In a surprising turn of events, according to an article in the New York Times on May 15, 2005, Kleiner, the attorney of Harvey, pointed a finger of accusation at Peter Stowasser, a former neighbor of Irene. Although Stowasser was once considered a possible suspect by the police, he was subsequently ruled out. Kleiner implicated Stowasser, who was now 61 years old and residing in Hightstown, in both the Irene case and the murder of Donna Macho from East Windsor, who went missing in 1984 and whose body was discovered in 1995. These claims made by Kleiner garnered significant attention, making headlines in the New Jersey section of the Sunday New York Times. He also strongly disputed the accuracy of the blood DNA evidence presented during Harvey's second trial, claiming it to be flawed and contaminated. Additionally, he demanded further DNA testing on other pieces of evidence collected in the case, suggesting that they could have implicated Stowasser instead. Kleiner raised concerns about missing evidence, including the absence of hair from the quilt. He expressed suspicion regarding the classification of the retrieved hair, noting that it was initially labeled as Caucasian and later had the phrase, "and one Negroid hair." Kleiner alleged that all the hair evidence, technician's notes, and microfilm have mysteriously vanished, leading him to believe that the hair evidence never actually existed. Capsack, who continued to serve as a prosecutor in Middle Assault County, expressed unwavering confidence in Harvey's conviction, firmly asserting that Stowasser played no part in the crime. According to Capsack, Stowasser was initially considered as a possible suspect in the case, but he was ultimately eliminated as a prime suspect. The decisive factor was the discovery of a size 6 bloody sneaker print on the victim's pillow, which contradicted Stowasser's size 12 foot. Interestingly, the article failed to mention that Harvey himself wore a size 6 sneaker. However, he clarified that Stowasser's involvement was merely circumstantial and not indicative of his guilt. In April 2007, Judge John F. Malone of the State Superior Court made a decision that dashed Harvey's hopes for a new evidentiary hearing and dismissed his habeas corpus challenge. He overturned Harvey's 1994 conviction, originally a death sentence, due to inadequate legal assistance provided to him during the early 1990s. Despite this development, Harvey, 65 years old, would still serve a 70-year sentence for a separate charge. The death sentence he received in 1994 had been reduced to life in prison without parole when New Jersey abolished capital punishment in 2007. Prior to this abolition, Harvey had spent 20 years on death row, although the state had not carried out an execution since 1963. However, late in November 2020, Harvey died in the State Woods State Prison in Bridgeton, which eventually closed all the doors of any further investigation. Peter Stowasser was considered a suspect in the murder of Donna Macho. The remains of Macho were found in 1995, approximately a mile away from the location of the Irene crime scene. It was claimed that Macho and Stowasser were both enrolled in classes at Mercer County College during the fall of 1983. It was pointed out that after Macho went missing, Stowasser did not attend the spring session classes that he had previously registered for. However, Stowasser maintains that although he attended Mercer County College, he had no knowledge of Macho or any connection to her. Harvey also was connected to Donna Macho, as the discovery of Donna's remains was in a wooded area near the farm where Harvey had briefly been employed, which raised suspicion. Adding to the puzzle was the finding of her abandoned car near a sewer plant conveniently within walking distance of Harvey's residence. These curious circumstances were enough for authorities to focus their attention on Harvey, exploring the possibility of his involvement in the case. Finally, in the last week of April 2023, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Platkin announced that the conclusive identification as the person responsible for the assault and murder of Donna Macho. The state's Attorney General said the case was finally cracked when investigators took a fresh look at this decades-old mystery. Colonel Patrick Callahan, superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, said that as 4 decades have passed, the memory of a young life cruelly taken away still lingers, haunting the hearts of those who loved her. The predator responsible callously discarded her remains in a shallow grave, leaving them undisturbed for over a decade. However, time cannot extinguish the burning desire for justice. Even though the perpetrator met his fate behind bars, serving time for another heinous crime, and ultimately passing away in 2020, it does not diminish the significance of this long-awaited resolution. We commend the relentless efforts of the Central Regional Cold Case Task Force and the dedicated state police forensic scientists who hopefully have brought a modicum of solace to the victim's grieving family after all these years. Queens, New York is a dazzling and thriving borough that pulsates with life. Home to over 2.3 million people who collectively shape its unique character, it is a place where the aroma of freshly made bagels and coffee blends with the scent of spicy curries and aromatic herbs from the local bodegas. Despite its lively energy and bright lights, Queens, like many urban areas, has a darker side. The city's stark contrast is exemplified by its grittier, impoverished areas and the criminal activity that plagues them. Gangs, drugs, and violence often lurk in the shadows of the city, threatening to undermine its vibrant energy. The shooting of Jermaine Dixon is a tragic reminder of this reality, a chilling reminder that even in the midst of the city's sparkling skyline, danger and tragedy could strike at any time. Jermaine Dixon, born on October 1, 1974, grew up in the gritty streets of Brooklyn, New York. Surrounded by poverty and violence, he was a product of his environment, and at a young age he found himself drawn to the allure of the streets. During his teenage years, he became a member of the infamous Patio Crew, a group that frequented a restaurant in Flatbush, earning its notorious reputation. Jermaine quickly rose through the ranks of the crew, earning the respect of his fellow members. He was known as a fierce enforcer, and his reputation for violence preceded him. In 1992, Jermaine and his brother Emile were involved in the murder of Alfonso Gooden, a crime for which they were both convicted. Dixon was incarcerated for a total of 19 years due to drug-related offenses and the murder of Alfonso Gooden in 1992, with prosecutors identifying Dixon as the one who pulled the trigger. Emile Dixon, his brother, was also found guilty of the same crime and is currently serving a life sentence. During his time in prison, Jermaine began to turn his life around. He became a model prisoner, earning the respect of both inmates and guards. After pursuing a business bachelor's degree, he submitted a request for compassionate release, expressing accountability for his actions and seeking an opportunity to demonstrate his worth. In an attempt to convince Judge Raymond Derry of his sincerity, Dixon penned a heartfelt letter stating, "It is clear that I am not the young man that Your Honor sentenced 20 years ago. I am now asking Your Honor to again take a chance with me and let me re-enter society to prove myself, my mother, children, family, and also the court that I can and will do the right thing upon release. I blame no one else but myself for the road I chose that put me in my current situation." With these words, Dixon hoped to convince the judge that he was a changed man, worthy of a second chance at life. Despite his past mistakes, Dixon was committed to turning his life around and becoming a productive member of society. After serving 19 years of his sentence, Jermaine was released on parole in 2011. He moved to Ozone Park, Queens, where he attempted to rebuild his life. Dixon recognized that he had made mistakes in the past and was determined to turn his life around. However, Dixon's criminal past continued to follow him, and he struggled to distance himself from the drug trade and other illicit activities. Despite his efforts to reform, Dixon remained under close scrutiny by authorities. Then a crime took place on a fateful morning of September 6, 2021, in South Ozone Park. It was a well-planned act of violence. Jermaine Dixon, a 46-year-old man who had recently been trying to rebuild his life, was shot at point-blank range by the shooter at 8 a.m. The shooter, who was later identified as being from Teaneck, New Jersey, was caught on surveillance video dressed in what appeared to be traditional Hasidic garb. The video footage displayed the assailant standing beside a white Nissan sedan, with the hood, trunk, and door ajar, working underneath the hood of the vehicle, suggesting that they were engaged in repairing or maintaining the vehicle, while Dixon was approaching his Ford Edge SUV. The assailant swiftly retrieved a firearm hidden within the car's engine, approached him from behind, and proceeded to shoot him in the head at extremely close range. After searching Dixon's body without finding anything, the shooter closed the Nissan's hood and departed from the scene in another vehicle. The shooter was not alone during the attack. Accompanied by a second person who kept watch on Dixon, the shooter, who had white gloves and a white face mask on, had been stalking Dixon for several hours before finally ambushing him as he approached his car. The shooter allegedly attempted to steal $10,000 from Dixon's pocket, but was unsuccessful, and he fled the scene empty-handed. The incident left the neighborhood in shock and raised concerns about the safety and security in the area. Detectives working the case discovered that Dixon had been staying at a nearby Comfort Inn, and sources close to the investigation revealed that Dixon had been constantly looking over his shoulder as he moved around the neighborhood. Dixon's cautious behavior suggested that he knew he was being targeted. They suspected the narcotics trade as the motive for the senseless killing. After the shooting, detectives quickly began combing through surveillance footage in the area. Police reviewed multiple cameras and traced the movements of a man dressed in a traditional Hasidic garb before he put on the disguise. The shooter was later identified as a man with 3 sealed arrests in the city, and his name was later revealed to be Ron Reeder. Through the combination of eyewitness accounts, surveillance footage, and ballistic evidence, investigators were able to identify Reeder and a second suspect, who had been keeping watch on Dixon for several hours before the attack. Police were still searching for the second suspect, but they made it clear that Reeder was the one who pulled the trigger. Ron Reeder was born in the state of New Jersey, growing up in a lower middle-class family in the town of Teaneck. As a teenager, he began associating with a gang known for its violent tactics, often resorting to extreme measures to maintain its dominance in the local drug trade. Reeder quickly rose through the ranks, earning a reputation as a ruthless enforcer who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. He had been incarcerated twice before in state prison. In 1986, he received a sentence of 4 to 6 years for charges related to robbery and weapon possession in Brooklyn. He served 3 years before being released. Later on, Reeder faced charges of manslaughter, resulting in a 21-year prison sentence. He was granted parole in 2012. Despite his criminal history, he managed to keep a relatively low profile after his release from prison, avoiding any significant run-ins with the law. However, his past caught up with him in 2021, when he was identified as the shooter in the high-profile killing of Jermaine Dixon in Queens, New York. Despite attempting to disguise himself in Hasidic-style clothing, Reeder was ultimately apprehended by law enforcement and is currently facing murder and weapon charges. A task force made up of the Bergen County Regional SWAT Team and the NYPD raided the defendant's Garden State apartment in late February. On February 23, 2023, 52-year-old Ron Reeder was arrested in New Jersey and extradited to New York, where he faced charges of murder and weapons possession. While the arrest of Reeder brought some closure to the case, the loss of Jermaine Dixon's life was a reminder of the impact of senseless violence on communities and individuals alike. Along the Ohio River lies the city of Cincinnati. This city is known for its rich architecture and bustling city life. In the city used to be the Art Institute of Ohio, where 21-year-old Katelyn Markham used to be a student in 2011. Katelyn was living a busy life as an art student, while also working 2 jobs. Katelyn's loved ones described her as a kind person who enjoyed making others happy. On top of her hectic schedule, she was planning her wedding with her fiancé, John Carter. The young couple had been dating for 6 years and were finally planning their perfect wedding, but when they least expected it, tragedy would strike, and it would be on August 14th of 2011, just days shy of Katelyn's 22nd birthday, that her fiancé John would report her missing.
The only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there, and it's just kind of, I'm sorry.
John and Katelyn, although dating for 6 years, did not live together while she was going to school. She had her own apartment, while John lived with his family. The night before she went missing on August 13th, John, as well as one of Katelyn's friends, Michael Feist, came over to her apartment to hang with the busy student. While there, Michelle felt a disturbing tension between the two and decided to leave early. Katelyn and John continued a heated argument, and John left around 11 p.m. According to John, he went to hang out with some friends who were having a bonfire. The couple continued to text throughout the night, with Katelyn sending her last text to John around 1 a.m. By 4 a.m., John had left his friend's house to go back home. As the sun rose and John woke up to begin his day, he still had not heard from Katelyn. He sent her a good morning text before preparing for work. John waited, but still heard nothing from Katelyn all day. He continued to call and text her throughout the day, but got no response. Feeling worried that something had happened, John left work early to head to her apartment to make sure his fiancée was okay. John, who had a copy of Katelyn's apartment key, entered her home but found nothing out of the ordinary. That is until he reached the upstairs, where he found Katelyn's dog locked in one of the bedrooms. According to John, this was not a normal spot where Katelyn would leave her dog when she was out of the house. Additionally, it appeared that the dog had not been let out all day, which was odd since Katelyn was a very responsible pet owner. John also confirmed that Katelyn's car was parked outside in its assigned parking spot, and yet he could not find Katelyn anywhere. As John grew more and more worried as the day went on, he began contacting friends and family of Katelyn to see if anyone had seen her. He learned that no one had heard from Katelyn since the previous day. John also confirmed that Katelyn had not shown up for a shift at one of her jobs at David's Bridal. This was very unlike Katelyn, as she was a very reliable employee. By 8 p.m. on August 14th, after exhausting all options, John finally contacted the police to report his fiancée missing. The search began quickly and was carried out extensively, but weeks went by and there was still no sign of Katelyn. During this time, flyers were passed out with Katelyn's information and search parties were conducted. When weeks turned into months, the case slowly went cold. On April 17, 2013, over a year and a half after her disappearance, Katelyn's remains were located at Big Cedar Creek in Cedar Grove, Indiana, approximately 30 miles from Katelyn's apartment. A couple who were scouting the area for scrap metal located a human jawbone wrapped in a grocery bag and immediately phoned the police. Quickly, investigators arrived and found more remains in the same area. Dental records confirmed that they belonged to Katelyn Markham.
My name's Andy Hicks, and just me and my wife. We was talking, or walking around looking for scrap, and here we come across some bones and called the cops. What makes you think it's a human bone? And I said, well, it's got all its teeth and it's shaped just like mine. And then we come back down a little while later and found the rest of the head, and it was sticking out of a black plastic grocery bag.
Katelyn's case went from a missing persons case to a homicide case. Katelyn's loved ones had hoped that one day she would be found alive and were devastated by the news that she was murdered. The search for her killer began, but just as quickly as her missing persons case went cold, so did her murder case. Years went by with no new information. Leads that would arise would soon go cold. In 2019, a man by the name of Michael Strauss was a suspect in the murder, as he had been charged with murdering a 23-year-old woman in the same area. There were similarities in the cases, such as both bodies being dumped in a field with a plastic bag. Strauss and Katelyn also had mutual friends, which increased the odds of him being guilty. However, there were many reasons to doubt that Strauss was involved in Katelyn's murder as well. The woman Strauss murdered was his own ex-girlfriend, whom he had stalked for months, and there was no evidence that he had been stalking Katelyn before her murder. Finally, in April of 2023, an arrest was made for Katelyn's murderer. In a shocking turn of events, her very own fiancé, John Carter, was arrested and charged for her murder. John had described his relationship with Katelyn as near perfect. But friends of Katelyn's would not agree. Michael Feiss had noted the tension between the two just one day before Katelyn's disappearance. John was suspected by friends and family in the very beginning, and investigators had enough evidence to finally charge him nearly 12 years after the murder. Firstly, Katelyn's body was found, wrapped in dark-colored plastic construction and landscaping sheeting material. Authorities believed Carter obtained this material at one of his homes, as a roll of landscaping material from a shed at his mother and stepfather's home on West Scioto Drive in Fairfield was listed on the search warrant inventory list at the location. Secondly, Fairfield police saw and photographed several red vertical scratch marks on the left side of Carter's neck on Sunday, August 14, 2011. According to reports, John gave two versions of how the scratches got there. He first blamed them on an electric razor he used, but in a later interview, he indicated that he was not sure how the scratches got there. Apart from this, evidence of their phone records show both their phones going dark at the same time on the night of the murder, but while Carter's would come on again later, Katelyn's was never found. There was also no record of the good morning text he claimed to have sent her at 4 a.m. on August 14, 2011. Now that he has been charged, John Carter's jury trial is set to begin in Butler County in June 2024, where more information will come to light regarding the murder of Katelyn Markham. His case returns to court for a pretrial conference on July 11th of 2023, however. At the present time, Carter has pleaded not guilty to all charges. St. Petersburg, Florida is a city on Florida's Gulf Coast, part of the Tampa Bay area. It's known for its pleasant weather and hence is nicknamed as the Sunshine City. St. Petersburg is popular for golfing, boating, fishing, and for its beaches. Its waterfront parks host the Dali Museum, featuring surrealistic works of art, and the Museum of Fine Arts, with works ranging from ancient to contemporary. Mojave Theater, home of the Florida Orchestra, is also an important possession. But this bright and sunny city also has a dark side. St. Petersburg is one of the most unsafe cities in the U.S., and therefore on an unfortunate night, on the streets of this city, an innocent teenager named Richard Evans's life was cut short. Although Richard Evans's exact birth date is unknown, it is certain that he was born sometime in 1978. Throughout his childhood, he was mostly raised by his mother, Catherine Clarkson, and they both kept in close contact with Sabrina Bird, Catherine's sister. By 1997, when Richard was about 18 or 19, he had been nicknamed Juicy because of his lively nature and the fact that he was always the life of the party, and rightly so. Richard was loved by all. He gelled easily with people and was highly devoted to his community. He had a tight friend circle and was the youngest in the group. But this joyful boy met a tragic end on the quiet night of May 28, 1997, in an alley near the 3400 block of 22nd Avenue South, St. Petersburg, Florida. A gunshot was heard. As a crowd gathered and the detectives arrived at the scene, they found Richard on the ground, lying unresponsive. He had been shot to death. Sabrina, Richard's aunt, was around the same area at a gas station when she heard the terrible news. She saw some of Richard's guy friends and asked them what was wrong. With a shivering voice and a dreadful look on his face, one of the boys said, "He's gone, Auntie." Sabrina still didn't know what was going on. She told him that she had just returned from a football game. Richard had left on his bike moments ago. When she reached the crime scene, she saw reporters around and knew it was all real. Sabrina went to her mother's house and met Kathleen, Juicy's mother, on the way. By then, Kathleen had already received a call informing her about the tragedy. As an investigation was probed, it was determined that Richard had been shot once in the chest. Interviews were conducted, witnesses were questioned, and some useful insights were obtained. At the time, witnesses said they saw Richard arguing with someone shortly before he was shot. It was during this argument that Richard was shot. According to the detectives, the witnesses chased the suspect and saw him drop his bicycle in an alley before he escaped. Witnesses described the suspect as a black male who was 6 feet tall, with a thin build, light skin, and short hair. He looked like he was somewhere between the ages of 15 and 20. The witnesses even described the killer's mannerisms. However, the detectives couldn't identify any potential suspects at the time, even after having a detailed description of the killer. Immediately after the shooting took place, investigators obtained fingerprints from the bicycles, but they didn't come back with a match, and there were no DNA samples at the time. A memorial service for everyone's beloved Richard took place, and he was buried at Sunnyside Cemetery, St. Petersburg, Pinellas County, Florida, USA. More than 2,000 people attended Richard's funeral. The investigation continued with great force, as the detectives were determined to get the killer. But in the months following Richard's murder, there were no significant developments, and hence, within the next couple of years, Richard's case went cold. However, in 2022, a substantial finding related to Richard's murder finally broke the case open. This happened when cold case detective Wallace Pavelski, who was a new patrol officer at the time of the shooting and one of the first officers on the crime scene, reviewed the investigation and got a match from a thumbprint with a man who was arrested for another crime. The forensic evidence found at Richard's crime scene led the detectives to the murderer. After 26 years, the St. Petersburg Police Department said that they found new answers in the cold case murder investigation and finally knew who killed Juicy. On Tuesday, May 30th, 2023, in a press conference, Michael Kovkasev said detectives learned who killed Richard Juicy Evans.
Richard was shot once in the chest. He died at 3400 block of 22nd Avenue South, and the case went cold very quickly. We were able to get a very, very detailed description of the subject at that time that was responsible for taking his life, including mannerisms and a description of who did it, but it never materialized. It never really went anywhere, and after a year or two, it just went cold. One of the things that is also near and dear to me, and I reached out to his mother about a decade ago, was we wanted to remember our fallen victims, that we had a place on our website to make sure we had accountability to where families can go and make sure that they were remembered. And she was one of the first individuals I reached out to get a picture. We didn't want to use driver's license pictures. We didn't want to use low-grade pictures. We wanted to use a picture that was important to the family members.
The fingerprints found on the bicycle were identified, and it turned out they belonged to a dead man who would have been 15 when Richard was killed. Furthermore, the description given by witnesses matched the suspect, and he already had a history of violence. While the police department shared its findings with Richard's family, Detective Koskovev said that St. Petersburg police would not release the suspect's name to the press or the public. The reason being that the suspect had already passed away back in November 2022 at the age of 41. However, the police department revealed that Juicy and the suspect knew each other, but the motive behind the homicide was still unclear. Richard's mother, Kathleen Clarkson, and his aunt Sabrina Bird were present at a press conference after Richard's case was solved. They said they were grateful for the department's work in identifying Juicy's killer, feeling like a load had been lifted.
It's like a load lifted.
I'm very grateful.
And
I'm very grateful. Right?
Justice has been served for my family.
It closed a lot in our heart. You know, when my son left us, it's like, oh, he was the life of the party.
Yes.
He brought a lot of tears to St. Pete.
Yes. Yes.
He had over 2,000 people to his funeral.
Well known, very
Over
well
2,000.
known, very respectable.
And
I'm 65. I thought I was going to leave this world not knowing who took my child's life. I'm very grateful. Justice has been served for my family, Catherine further stated. There was a moment of joy and laughter as Catherine and Sabrina shared the story behind Richard being named Juicy.
yes, anytime you see him, there go Jew boy. We call him Jew boy and
Yes.
Juicy, you know. He was never called Richard. If you call him Richard, he gonna know.
He wasn't going to
He
answer.
was gonna answer.
Get the juicy nickname.
Oh, God.
My brother, God rest his soul too. And by the way, he have lost so many family members.
Gloucester Township, a thriving township nestled in the heart of New Jersey, offers a unique blend of suburban charm and vibrant community spirit. Located in Camden County, this picturesque area is home to a diverse population of residents. However, beneath this serene facade lies a haunting secret. The tragic murder of Carol Reiff shattered the tranquility, leaving the community in shock. Carol Reiff was a remarkable 59-year-old woman, described by her family as a gentle soul who found solace and joy in the great outdoors. She worked at Cherry Hill Insurance Agency. A devoted mother, she exuded kindness and compassion, leaving an indelible mark on the lives she touched. Dawn Santani, her daughter, reminisced about her mother's warm nature, remarking on her innate ability to spread love and gentleness. Despite the hardships she faced, Carol's resilience shone through in her love for running. Being a marathon runner in the wake of the harrowing Boston Marathon bombing a decade ago, she stood undeterred, refusing to succumb to fear. Dawn fondly recalls her mother's unwavering determination to continue participating in 5Ks and half marathons, a testament to her indomitable spirit. "We won't be intimidated," Carol would proclaim, embodying a steadfast resolve in the face of adversity. It was on the fateful day of June 21, 2013, when Carol Reiff vanished without a trace. The alarm bells of concern rang loudly as she failed to appear for a planned trip with her family and remained unresponsive to their desperate attempts to reach her via cell phone. The community rallied together, with Gloucester Township police officers swiftly entering Reiff's residence at Lakeview Apartments. There they discovered her keys while her car stood silently in the parking lot. Days passed, each one deepening the sense of unease that hung over the community. And then on June 24, 2013, a heartbreaking discovery shattered any remaining hope. In the quiet depths of a wooded area, tucked away behind an old maintenance building off Lower Landing Road, detectives stumbled upon the remains of Carol Reiff. The once vibrant spirit had been cruelly extinguished, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. During the painstaking initial investigation, a glimmer of hope emerged in the form of potential DNA evidence. Detectives meticulously collected samples from a pair of jeans belonging to the victim, as well as an empty beer bottle found within her apartment. However, the veil of uncertainty descended as DNA testing failed to yield any conclusive results at that time. The grim reality of Carol Reiff's fate was declared a homicide, but the exact manner of her death remained a mystery. Due to the lack of new technology, determining the cause of death proved challenging for the medical examiner. The investigation persisted with caution, intent on uncovering the truth concealed beneath the surface. The case, shrouded in ambiguity, grew more complex as the days unfolded, and soon enough, it went cold. Then, the investigation took a new turn in May 2023, when the detectives had collected some very good leads. According to them, the investigation into Carol Reiff's murder had been ongoing since her body was discovered in 2013. Detectives from Camden County and Gloucester Township had been working tirelessly to find the person responsible for her death. Investigators remained confident that the case would soon reach a resolution. Advances in forensic technology had been on their side, and DNA evidence recovered from the scene was being re-examined using modern techniques. Detective Jankowski expressed his optimism about the case, stating, "We're very hopeful that we'll be able to move forward with this case and bring justice to Carol Reiff and her family." Despite the passage of nearly 10 years, the detectives involved in the case had not given up on finding answers. Detective Jankowski emphasized the importance of community involvement in solving the crime, stating, "Any little bit of information can help us move forward with this case." In a stunning turn of events, a major breakthrough occurred in the nearly decade-old case of Carol Reiff's murder. The Gloucester Township community, who had long awaited news regarding the beloved mother and friend's tragic demise, finally received a glimmer of hope. On Wednesday, May 10, 2023, first-degree murder charges were officially filed against a man named Joseph Grishoff, age 59, according to officials. The arrest of Grishoff took place in the morning of that fateful day in Moorestown. Orchestrated by the U.S. Marshals Service, New York, New Jersey Regional Fugitive Task Force, Camden Division. Grishoff, a maintenance worker at the apartment complex and a neighbor to Reiff, had been interviewed by the police in the days following the discovery of her remains. According to Detective Jeremy Jankowski of the Camden County Prosecutor's Office, Grishoff was questioned but never arrested. He was interviewed and he did provide a statement, Jankowski said, "But it's not something that we're willing to release at this point in the investigation." During the interview, Grishoff acknowledged his acquaintance with Reiff and admitted to having complimented her in the past. However, he adamantly denied ever setting foot inside her apartment. The initial investigation had uncovered potential DNA evidence, which was found on a pair of Reiff's jeans and an empty beer bottle in her apartment. At the time, the DNA testing yielded inconclusive results, leaving the case in a state of uncertainty. However, thanks to advancements in DNA analysis technology, a renewed examination of the evidence revealed significant information. Prosecutors disclosed that there was a strong proposition indicating that both Reiff and Grishoff's DNA were present on the jeans and the beer bottle, linking them in an unexpected and crucial manner. Following the arrest, Grishoff, now residing in Mount Laurel, was swiftly transported to the Camden County Correctional Facility, where he would await a detention hearing. It should be noted that the charges against him are merely allegations at this point, and he had not been convicted in connection with Carol Reiff's case. For the Gloucester Township community and the Reiff family, this arrest signified a glimmer of hope after years of waiting for justice. The case, once shrouded in darkness, had taken a significant step towards resolution, offering solace to those who have mourned the loss of a beloved mother and friend. As the legal process unfolds, the truth behind Carol Reiff's tragic fate may finally be brought to light. The town itself is a very nice place with good schools, and people feel safe and happy there. In terms of safety and crime rates, Wellington has been reported to be a relatively peaceful and safe community. According to many surveys, Wellington's crime rate was lower than the national average, and it has been listed as one of the safest cities in Florida. But on Memorial Day weekend in May 1990, while everyone else was enjoying parades, barbecues, and picnics, something terrible happened to the Warren family. Marlene Warren was born on April 15, 1950. She grew up in Michigan and loved spending time with her sisters on her grandfather's farm. She enjoyed baking, making art, and painting, especially clowns. The whole family shared her love for clowns, and her parents even had a room dedicated to them. Marlene had her first child in 1965 at the tender age of 15 and named him after her husband, John Aranes. Later in 1969, she had another child named Joey. Sadly, Marlene became a single mother of two after her first husband, John Aranes, died in a car accident. She later married Michael Warren in 1972. Michael Warren was just 19 and younger than 22-year-old Marlene. They moved from Michigan to South Florida, where Michael's family lived. Michael got a job as a meat inspector, but they also started investing in rental properties, which eventually brought in a lot of money. Marlene managed the rental properties, and Michael quit his job to open a used car lot called Bargain Motors. He sold cars to people who had no credit and couldn't buy them elsewhere. In the late 1980s, Mike and Marlene bought their dream home in Wellington, Florida. However, in 1983, Michael was arrested for tampering with the odometers on his used cars. He pleaded guilty and received probation, but kept his business for a few more years. Mike and Marlene led separate lives, with Mike focused on his business and spending time at the racetrack, while Marlene managed their rental properties. In 1988, tragedy struck again when Marlene's oldest son, John Jr., died in a car accident at just 22 years old. His death caused tension in Michael and Marlene's relationship. During this time, Michael Warren met Sheila King, the wife of one of his employees, Richard Spud King. There was an instant connection between Michael and Sheila. However, initially they kept their relationship a secret, even though it was obvious to those around them. On a rainy Saturday morning of May 26, 1990, Michael went to the racetrack while 40-year-old Marlene stayed at home. She was cooking breakfast for her son, 21-year-old Joey, who had some of his friends over. At around 10:45 a.m., there was a knock on the door. When Marlene opened it, she saw a clown holding flowers and balloons, and she assumed it was a gift. She was pretty excited to see a clown at her door, having loved them ever since she was a child. But behind the balloons and the clown costume, the clown held a gun. The clown pulled out the gun and shot her in the face. Joey heard the gunshot, ran to the door, and saw the clown driving away in a Chrysler LeBaron. Marlene was dying on the ground, and a neighbor named Bill Kramer had heard the shot too. Some people ran out, saying that someone had shot Joey's mother. An ambulance was called, and Marlene was taken to the hospital, but she died 2 days later on May 28, 1990. Marlene was an outstanding human, friendly, loving, kind, always courteous, and always respectful, but her end was unfortunate. After Marlene's shooting, Joey saw a clown walking away, but all he could remember was that the clown had brown eyes. Initially, Joey's description to the police was vague, saying the suspect had broad shoulders and big hands. However, he did see the clown drive away in a white Chrysler LeBaron, which was a crucial detail. At first, Michael Warren was a suspect, but he had an alibi as he was at the racetrack. As a result, the police turned their attention to his girlfriend, Sheila King, and the more they investigated, the more evidence pointed toward her involvement. There were allegations of an affair between Michael Warren and Sheila King at the time of the crime. Michael vehemently denied these. However, investigators were scrutinizing the relationship to identify the motive and opportunity for Marlene's murder. Sheila also went by Sheila Sheltra, her maiden name, and had a criminal record dating back to her upbringing in Central Florida. Sheila was known to be headstrong, some say wild, and very attractive. Her long hair was often described as similar to Crystal Gale's. Sheila had a criminal record from a young age, including a shoplifting charge and a theft charge a few years later. Her mugshot showed her smiling, seemingly unbothered by the arrest. People who knew her revealed that Sheila had associated herself with older men and bad influences from a young age. She was married to Richard Spud King, a former Ku Klux Klan member who had served time for drug trafficking. Richard was 20 years older than Sheila. Sheila even moved to Georgia to be close to him while he was in prison. After Sheila's husband was released from prison in Georgia, they moved back to Florida, where Richard started working with Michael Warren. Soon, the three ex-felons began to spend a lot of time together, engaging in sketchy activities. One such incident involved Sheila dressing up as a prostitute to meet someone who had purchased a car in a motel room. While she was in there, Richard and Michael, who were armed, repossessed the car. Sheila was also spotted holding the buyer at gunpoint, and the trio fled the scene. As time passed, Michael and Sheila grew closer, and Richard faded into the background. Sheila rented an apartment in Pine Ridge, and the residents assumed that she was married to Michael because of the amount of time he spent there. Co-workers of Michael and Sheila told investigators that they believed the two were having an affair. They would go out for long lunches and were very affectionate towards each other. There was substantial evidence suggesting that they were indeed having an affair. Police records quoted Michael's mother recalling an incident where she accompanied Michael on one of his racetrack outings. She sensed something between Michael and Sheila and asked her if she loved him. Sheila confirmed that she did, but Michael responded by saying that he loved himself. During this period, Michael's marriage with Marlene was falling apart. An employee at the car dealership claimed that Michael would come in furious after fighting with Marlene and offer $10,000 to anyone who would kill her. There were also reports of Michael saying that he would make someone rich if they got rid of his wife, and they would never have to work again. After Marlene's murder, both Michael and Sheila became suspects in the case. While Michael was the obvious suspect, investigators started to question whether his girlfriend could have committed the crime. The nature of the murder raised suspicions, as most men would shoot their victims in the heart, not in the face. As investigators delved deeper into the case, the evidence started to point toward Sheila instead of Michael, leading them to believe that she might have a motive to commit the crime. In the investigation, finding the white Chrysler LeBaron that Joey saw became the top priority for the police. They learned that a couple had rented the car from a nearby car lot called Payless Cars. When it was time to return the car, they got confused and dialed the wrong number from an ad in the phone book. The ad was taken out by Michael Warren for his car lot, Bargain Motors, and the number listed was his. But the ad that Michael put out looked very similar to that of an ad for the Payless car lot. The couple called the number thinking it was for Payless Cars, and someone at Michael's car lot instructed them to leave the car outside the gate with the keys in the windshield wipers. However, the car was stolen shortly after. On the day of Marlene's funeral, investigators located a Chrysler LeBaron in a Winn-Dixie parking lot approximately 5 miles away from the crime scene. A number of hairs were discovered inside the car, some of which appeared to be from an acrylic wig with orange and yellow fibers. However, the DNA technology at that time was insufficient to identify precisely what the fibers were, as well as the hair samples. In addition to the car, investigators also found the place where the suspect bought the clown costume, balloons, and flowers. 2 women who worked at the Spotlight Capezio costume shop told police that a woman came in a few days before the murder and requested a clown costume, specifically Ruby's clown costume, an Afro clown wig, Bob Kelly clown makeup, and a sponge nose. Initially, the shop workers asked the woman to return the next day as they were closed, but the woman insisted on purchasing the costume that night. She was described as around 5'8", with brown eyes, long chocolate hair, and wearing jeans and a men's work shirt. The police reported that the shop workers identified Sheila from a photo lineup, stating that she was the woman who came to the store a few days before the murder at closing time. Sheila's potential involvement in Marlene's murder continued to be investigated, and more evidence started to pile up against her. One piece of evidence came from a nearby public supermarket, where the specific type of mylar balloons used by the clown were sold. An employee there identified a woman with long brown hair who bought those balloons just an hour and a half before the murder, and that employee was also able to identify Sheila from photos. Further adding to the suspicion was the fact that Sheila had previously dressed up as a clown. During her marriage to Richard Keene, the couple lived in a trailer park in Pahokee on the edge of Lake Okeechobee. Sheila had become friendly with people around town, including some employees at an auto parts store. On one occasion, she had even dressed up as a clown to entertain them. Despite this mounting evidence, prosecutors didn't feel they had enough to make an arrest. In 1991, about a year later, the investigation heated up as Michael and Sheila became the prime suspects. In an attempt to clear his name, Michael went on a radio show accompanied by Joey. During the interview, Michael denied any involvement in the murder.
Michael, were you under the impression that you were a suspect from the very beginning?
Most definitely. He never.
Spouse?
Matter of fact, I like to go into detail about that.
And Joey defended Sheila, who he was surprised was even a suspect.
You've either heard about this or been told this, or it's been asked of you that the police were suspicious, and she is even mentioned as a prime suspect in all of this. Would that shock you that she would be a prime suspect?
Yes, it would.
Despite Joey's initial belief that the clown was a man due to its large size, evidence was beginning to point toward a woman. Michael had an alibi that confirmed he was at the racetracks during the time of the murder, leaving Sheila as the primary suspect. However, just when it seemed like the case was going nowhere, a twist emerged. Backtracking in time, in 1987, when Joey was around 18 years old, he was charged with attempted murder. The Warren family hired Christopher DeSantos as their lawyer. After a successful hearing at the courthouse, DeSantos and Michael Warren were walking out celebrating Joey's trial win. Then, Michael casually asked whether someone who hired a hitman to kill their wife would still be able to inherit their estate. The lawyer was taken aback, but answered that the law prohibited a murderer from inheriting, except in cases of manslaughter or if the murderer was someone else. DeSantos, unfortunately, gave another example that he later regretted. He said that if someone wore a clown suit, their identity would be hidden, making it difficult to get a conviction.
For example, if you wore a clown suit, it wasn't intended to advise them to wear a clown suit or anything like that, but the point was that if you can't prove identity, the perpetrator, you can't get a conviction.
He didn't intend to advise Michael to wear a clown suit, but the point was that if identity couldn't be proven, then there could be no conviction. Essentially, DeSantos had given him a recipe for murder. As the investigation into Marlene's murder progressed, and suspicions fell on Michael and Sheila, the investigators interviewed DeSantos too, because they thought that maybe the clown figure was taking revenge on Joey and his friends. But then this interaction between DeSantos and Michael became a significant piece of evidence. It raised the question of whether Michael had taken the lawyer's advice to heart and used a clown suit to conceal his identity while committing the crime. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Marlene had expressed fear of her husband prior to her murder. She had told people that she wanted to divorce Mike, but was scared he would kill her. This, coupled with DeSantos' statement, suggested that Mike had knowledge of how he could inherit property after killing his wife. Despite this, there were no arrests made in the weeks following these revelations, as investigators needed concrete evidence to proceed. The case remained unsolved as the months dragged on. Despite not acknowledging any romantic involvement, Michael and Sheila's co-workers had their suspicions. A year after Marlene's death, they let their guard down and took a vacation together to the Bahamas. At a fancy hotel resort casino, other couples noticed them come in. Sheila appeared uneasy, while Michael was himself, loud and brash. This tipped off the police yet again. Meanwhile, Michael decided to make another appearance on a radio show. And in that radio show, Michael said that he had last spoke to Sheila a month ago, when, in reality, Sheila was with Michael all the time.
Have you spoken to Sheila?
I've spoken to both of them in the past, yes.
When was the last time you spoke to Sheila?
Probably about a month ago.
After Michael's radio appearance, investigators began to focus on him as a suspect in his wife's murder. They searched his business and obtained a warrant to go through his records. Michael had a history of odometer tampering, and investigators found that he had been doing the same thing at his car lot. They charged him with multiple crimes, including racketeering, odometer tampering, fraud, and theft. Although Michael was sentenced to 9 years in prison, there was still no concrete evidence linking him or Sheila to Marlene's murder. The investigation seemed to hit a dead end. But in 1997, new evidence emerged that would bring the case back to life. In 1997, a man contacted the police with a lead linking Michael Warren to his wife's murder. The informant was the son of an employee at Bargain Motors who had recently died, and the informant claimed that his father had made a shocking confession to him on his deathbed. According to the informant, his father told him that all the answers to the case could be found by pulling up a vehicle that was submerged in water. He even gave the exact location of the vehicle and claimed to know who planned the murder and where the gun and clown costume were hidden. This was a major lead, and investigators believed that they could finally solve the case by recovering the murder weapon and costume. Divers were sent down to the location and they found the vehicle, but unfortunately there was nothing of significance inside it. This setback sent the investigation back to square one, and the case again remained cold for some time. In 2002, Michael Warren and Sheila Keene decided to get married in Las Vegas as the investigation into Marlene Warren's death had come to a halt. The case remained unsolved, but Marlene's parents were convinced that Sheila was the killer clown. However, in 2013, the case was reopened, and Sheila was once again a prime suspect, particularly due to her marriage to Michael. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office received a grant to investigate cold cases, including the Wellington Clown murder. They formed a task force with members from the state attorney's office and the FBI to review the evidence and interview witnesses. The task force submitted new evidence for DNA analysis, which helped them get the indictment. This included DNA samples from different people who were suspects in the case, including Michael and Sheila. It also included the possible DNA samples found in the clown wig and other hair strands that were inside the Chrysler LeBaron. The evidence gathered from interviews and analysis allowed investigators to take a fresh look at the case. Mike and Sheila had started a new life in Abington, a small town in Virginia, where they had reinvented themselves. Sheila had even changed her name to Debbie, and they were living a seemingly happy life, with neighbors describing them as friendly and in love. They had even opened up a popular fast food restaurant called the Purple Cow in Tennessee, just across the border. Investigators eventually tracked down Michael and Sheila at their restaurant. Despite being prime suspects, they were not on the run or trying to hide, and they were still working and living their lives openly. It seemed that they had finally moved on from their past and were doing well. Although Michael Warren was generally described as a laid-back and happy individual, not everyone had a favorable impression of him, especially after an encounter with one of his neighbors that showed another side of him. Apparently, Michael decided to take some rocks from his neighbor's property without permission, but when confronted about it, he suggested that they should be neighborly about the situation. The neighbor replied that the neighborly thing to do would have been to ask for permission first. Michael then responded with insults, calling the neighbor scrawny and using a derogatory term. The neighbor stood his ground and called Michael a bully. As Michael and Sheila lived their seemingly idyllic life in Abington, Virginia, a dark secret lingered in the shadows. One night during a party, a drunken Sheila, known to her co-workers as Debbie, revealed a chilling tale of how she had gotten away with murder in Florida. Meanwhile, in Florida, detectives relentlessly pursued the case, utilizing the latest DNA technology to uncover a potential suspect in the murder of Marlene Warren. The evidence pointed to one person, the very same Sheila Keene Warren, or Debbie, who had casually shared her deadly secret with her unsuspecting colleagues. On December 26, 2017, Mike and Sheila were driving back to their hometown of Abington from Vermont in their Cadillac SUV when they were pulled over by the police. Sheila was arrested but didn't ask why. Instead, she asked if her husband was also being arrested. The reason for her arrest: Sheila had been indicted for first-degree murder with a firearm, the same crime that had been unsolved for 27 years. Despite being a prime suspect from the beginning of the investigation, Sheila had managed to evade arrest until that day. Now she faced the potential penalty of life in prison. As Sheila was being brought into the police station, a video captured the moment, followed by a mugshot. In the mugshot, she is seen smiling, reminiscent of her teenage mugshot when she was first arrested. The contrast between the heinousness of the crime she was being accused of and the nonchalant expression on her face was unsettling. Sheila Keene Warren's lawyer stated that she strongly denied any involvement in the murder. During her time in prison, she wrote numerous letters that showed her belief in her own innocence. Despite the passage of 27 years, and the initial description of the clown being that of a man, the state of Florida was confident that they would secure a conviction, even though the murder weapon was still missing. Sheila had been awaiting trial in jail after her arrest in 2017, while investigators continued to build their case against her. Finally, on April 25, 2023, 59-year-old Sheila pleaded guilty to the crime of dressing up as a clown and shooting Marlene Warren. Although her lawyer still maintained her innocence, he believed that her guilty plea helped her case. If the jury had found her guilty, she could have faced a minimum sentence of 25 years in prison. However, by pleading guilty, she received a reduced sentence of only 12 years. Remarkably, her lawyer even suggested that Sheila could be released as early as 2024 due to her good behavior in prison. With Sheila's confession, the investigators finally solved the case. But do you think that Sheila meant her confession? Or was she just really looking for a deal to cut her sentence? In Dorchester, Massachusetts, which is the city of Boston's largest and most diverse neighborhood, a perplexing story unfolded. Felicia McGuire, a 32-year-old mother to an 11-year-old boy named Nicholas Fahey, suddenly went missing in October 2007. During that time, she resided with her boyfriend, an 18-year-old named David Pena, at Roxton Street. On October 7, 2007, Sharon McGuire, Felicia's mother, contacted the police to report her daughter's disappearance. Sharon expressed her deep concerns, explaining that Felicia had maintained regular contact with her and her child before her sudden vanishing. Following this, the authorities initiated an extensive search. Despite their efforts, Felicia remained elusive, leaving her loved ones and authorities perplexed. A few months later, on January 16, 2008, a significant interview took place inside the Mebane, North Dorchester police station. Boston police officers sat face-to-face with Pena, the boyfriend of Felicia. During the interview, Pena disclosed details of a heated altercation that occurred in the early hours of October 7, 2007. He admitted that he and Felicia had engaged in a fight, resulting in Felicia hurting him with a pair of scissors in his shoulder. Gripped by fear, Pena fled the apartment and sought refuge at his mother's house on Devon Street in Dorchester. Days passed before Pena mustered the courage to return to their shared living space. Upon his arrival, he was met with an unsettling sight. Felicia and her belongings were nowhere to be found. Pena concluded that she had left, possibly heading to Florida to reunite with an ex-boyfriend, as he had not seen her since the incident. These revelations hung heavy in the interview room, casting a veil of uncertainty over the investigation. On March 4, 2008, Boston police located an unnamed neighbor who lived below Felicia and Pena's apartment. The neighbor provided crucial information about the events that unfolded on October 7, 2007, the day Felicia was reported missing. According to the neighbor, in the early hours of the fateful day, Pena had been banging on his apartment door. He confirmed that Pena had been in a fight with Felicia and needed a ride to his mother's house on Devon Street. The neighbor noticed a minor wound on Pena's shoulder, but what caught his attention was the excessive amount of blood on Pena's shirt, surpassing what would be expected from a stab wound. In an act of kindness, the neighbor helped Pena clean his wound before driving him to his mother's house. The neighbor's story took a captivating turn as he revealed further events that unfolded in the days following their initial encounter. 2 days later, Pena returned to express gratitude to the neighbor for his previous assistance. However, this time he was accompanied by another man, who the neighbor believed to be Pena's brother. Following this, Pena and his brother ascended the stairs, and when they came down a few moments later, they were carrying a tightly rolled-up blanket. They were struggling with it as their exertion was evident. Sensing their struggle, the neighbor, accompanied by his cousin, kindly offered to help. However, Pena dismissed their offer, instructing him to mind their own business. Together, Pena and his brother wrestled with the mysterious bundle, eventually managing to fit it into the back seat of a beige Malibu or Lumina. With a sudden burst of speed, they departed, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The following day brought an unexpected encounter. Pena returned, his face marked by a wild, almost frenzied look. However, the neighbor, guided by a growing unease, made the decision not to grant him access to the apartment building. Pena stood outside before eventually accepting the rejection and vanishing into the shadows. With this, the interview with the neighbor concluded, leaving a lingering air of mystery. His account provided a glimpse into a series of puzzling events, urging the detectives to explore the depths of the mystery surrounding Felicia's disappearance. In a pivotal development, on March 25, 2008, the police successfully located and interviewed a friend of Felicia, whose identity was kept confidential. Within the confines of the interview room, the friend unveiled a startling revelation, weaving a tale of dangerous transactions. It came to light that the friend usually lent his brown 2005 Chevy Impala to Pena in exchange for hard drugs. Their association has thrived on this unusual arrangement. In the days leading up to Felicia's disappearance, Pena had borrowed the vehicle as per their agreement. However, when Pena returned to the car a couple days later, the friend noticed something amiss. The back seat, typically serving as an access point to the trunk, was strangely folded down and broken. What struck him even more was the car's cleanliness. It seemed as though Pena had made an effort to remove any traces of its use. This was unusual, because Pena had never cleaned the car before returning it. The discovery struck a chord of curiosity within the friend's mind. Why had Pena gone to such lengths to clean the car? Buoyed by this newfound lead, the investigators redoubled their efforts to uncover the truth. Each piece of evidence, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was carefully examined and analyzed. Technicians from the Boston Police Crime Lab carefully combed through the mentioned vehicle, but their search yielded no evidence of significance. Following this turn of events, the case retreated from the public eye, fading into the background for several years. Years later, on March 15, 2017, a meeting unfolded between Boston Police, Suffolk County District Attorney Masai King, and an unidentified witness housed within a correction facility in Maine. This mysterious witness is perhaps none other than the individual who had been seen in the company of Pena by Felicia's neighbor, and is believed to be Pena's brother. The revelation that this witness made forever altered the course of the investigation. According to his account, Pena had reached out to him just days after Felicia was reported missing. Urgency laced Pena's voice as he pleaded for assistance in moving things out of the Roxon Street apartment he had shared with Felicia. In the early morning hours, the witness arrived at the apartment to find bags already packed and ready for transport. Amongst the belongings, a peculiar sight caught his eye, a tightly rolled carpet concealing a blanket within. The witness could not shake the suspicion that something far more sinister was within that makeshift casing. His worst fears were confirmed when, upon unrolling the carpet, he discovered Felicia's lifeless body wrapped in the blanket. Acting on instruction from Pena, he aided in transporting the carpet and its grisly contents to an undisclosed location within the Boston region. Together they ventured into a wooded area near a parking lot. Following this, the witness returned to the car at Pena's request, waiting in the haunting silence as time seemed to stand still. Minutes stretched into eternity until Pena emerged from the woods without Felicia's body. With this, the witness account came to an end, leaving investigators shell-shocked. However, despite the mounting evidence against Pena, the authorities did not make a move. On March 9, 2002, Boston police reached out to an ex-boyfriend of Felicia. He told them that he had not heard from Felicia since she vanished in October 2007. The ex also believed that she was dead. January 2023 breathed new life into the investigation. Pena, the figure intertwined in Felicia's past, was apprehended in Florida. The charges brought against him were grave. This included the alleged murder of Felicia and an unrelated count of drug trafficking. Pena was then escorted back to Boston to face the consequences of his actions. The wheels of justice turned on January 17, 2023. As Pena stood in Dorchester Municipal Court, the prosecution painted a chilling picture, accusing him of snuffing out Felicia's life during a heated 2007 altercation in their Dorchester apartment. They alleged that Pena disposed of her body, concealed within a rolled-up blanket. Pena maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty to the charges. The court, considering the severity of the accusations, ordered him to be held without bail. Meanwhile, the search for Felicia's body continued, but as of now, her whereabouts remain unknown. The legal battle also looms ahead, casting a cloud of uncertainty over the case, with Pena's fate yet to be determined. Cape Coral is a city located in Lee County, Florida, in the United States. It is often referred to as the waterfront wonderland because it has more miles of canals than anywhere else in the world. The crime rate here is near the average for all cities and towns of all sizes in America. The chances of someone becoming a victim of violent crime in Cape Coral is 1 in 84. And sadly, this waterfront wonderland became the setting for a heinous crime that left the whole city in shock in 1990. But the victim wasn't a native of Cape Coral. She hailed from Ohio, also known as the Buckeye State. Lisa Diane Story was born on September 15, 1957, in Ohio, USA. She was brought up by her parents, Donna Eileen Howitt Story and Kenneth Ray Story, and turned out to be a kind and helpful person. By 1990, 32-year-old Lisa was working at Cape Coral Hospital. On May 7, 1990, Lisa moved into an apartment with her best friend and co-worker Jan Cornell. It had only been 2 days since then, and on the night of May 9, 1990, Lisa was babysitting Jan's daughter, Robin Marie Cornell. Robin was a spontaneous, playful, and outdoorsy 5th grader who had an argument with her mother that same night about having a friend stay overnight at their place. But since Robin hadn't cleaned up her room that night, Jan refused to allow Robin to have a friend over. Jan had plans to go out and meet a friend and head over to watch a football game before returning home. She wasn't worried about leaving her 11-year-old daughter that night, as Lisa would be there looking after her. The last thing that Jan told Robin before leaving for a night out was, "Good night, I'm going to Donnie's. I love you." As planned, Jan first met her friend and then enjoyed the football game. But unfortunately, the game went until quite late, and Jan eventually fell asleep. She woke up around 4:15 a.m. in a panic on May 10, 1990. She had to be at work in 15 minutes. Luckily, she lived just a few blocks away, so she raced home, regretting having a night out, and worrying whether she would have enough time to iron her nurse uniform. As soon as she reached her house, she found the front door locked. In her mind, she cursed Lisa because she had told her not to lock it. Jan went around the side door, which was slightly open. As she was getting in, she heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. She was aware of the risk she would face if a burglar actually was inside. But she knew that her daughter was inside, and so, without giving it a second thought, Jan pushed her way in. When she managed to get inside, she found her once tidy home completely ransacked. She saw the ironing board in the kitchen was laid out as she had left it. But there was something more strange. Framed pictures of Robin and Lisa were arranged on the ironing board. She immediately knew something was wrong. Jan raced up the stairs past Lisa's room and found her daughter, Robin, lifeless. Robin was lying on the floor with her face down in Jan's room. She was nude and bloody, with a pillow underneath her, propping her lower body up. Jan screamed for Lisa for help, but there was no response. Jan cried trying to figure out what happened while she was gone, but she was unaware that Lisa too was lying dead in the next room.
And then that's when my mind just was going 100 miles an hour trying to figure out what is going on here. And I, called 911 and tried to resuscitate Robin. And in my mind, I knew she was gone. She was cold. She was a little hard. And I knew that she was gone. But I still thought maybe I'd get a miracle.
As the authorities were informed, the detectives arrived soon after, and Lisa and Robin were both pronounced dead. Until detectives told her, Jan had no clue that Lisa had passed away as well. The crime was ruled a homicide, and the detectives stated that both were murdered in their apartment. After a deep examination of the crime scene, the detectives found traces of bodily fluid on the pillowcase and bedsheet in Robin's room. There were a few blonde hair strands, 3 beer cans, and an adult toy at the crime scene. An autopsy was conducted on both Lisa and Robin, which confirmed that they had both been assaulted, and there were foreign bodily fluids found in Robin's body. The detectives first questioned Jan herself to figure out if she knew anything more about the awful incident. Jan explained that Lisa had just moved in a few nights ago, before the murders took place. 2 days after helping Lisa move in, Jan was invited by her boyfriend to watch a playoff football game. Jan said she originally wasn't going to go, but Robin had told her to go and have fun, as Jan's boyfriend was supposed to pick up Robin for school the next day. Robin asked Jan to remind him about the same. The investigation went on, and the only evidence in the case was foreign bodily fluid found at the crime scene. The detectives tried to crack Lisa and Robin's case, but there wasn't much development in the following days. Jan wasn't happy about this. This was a nightmare for her, and she wanted the culprit to be found and made to suffer for what he had done. With no potential suspects and any new findings, Lisa and Robin's case went cold. Lisa was buried at Lee Memorial Park, Fort Myers, Lee County, Florida, while Robin was laid to rest in Fort Myers Memorial Gardens, Fort Myers, Lee County, Florida.
May 10th of 2013 marks the 23rd anniversary of a double homicide that happened here in Cape Coral, what is commonly referred to as the Cornell Story homicide case. And what it is Lisa Story and Robin Cornell were brutally murdered May 10th of 1990 in their condo here in Cape Coral. And the day before the anniversary, the Public Affairs Office here at the Cape Coral Police Department brought several media outlets to Jan Cornell's home so that she would have the opportunity to get her story out again and generate some information to help us solve this case.
Years passed, but Jan never gave up on the case. She wasn't going to rest until the killer of her daughter and her best friend was found and put behind bars. Because of Jan's immense efforts, investigator Fidel Balan was hired by Cape Police in 2015 to work the case for 6 months.
Not giving up. I'm not going away. I'm not giving up. And thankfully, I've been able to keep the Cape Coral Police Department on board with my my promise. I've told them all about my promise. I promised the day I had to say goodbye that for as long as I was alive, I would never stop looking for who hurt them. And like I said, I've managed to establish a relationship and keep the Cape Coral Police on board. And they're still looking as well. We'll just keep doing this as long as, you know, we can reach out and ask people, because I'm convinced in my heart and soul that someone still in this community may have knowledge of who did this crime, and they keep holding back, and every year I say, it's time, please come forward. You know, they're not helping themselves by keeping this to themselves.
His contract was extended twice, and Lisa and Robin's case was reopened. Jan had been the driving force in keeping Lisa and Robin's case alive. But this wasn't easy for her. For years, Jan wrestled with the police to keep the case active. Jan believed that the detectives finally understood that she wasn't going to let go of the case. To Jan, 17 years ago, the detectives seemed clueless about the case. But now she was convinced that the police department had better investigators. In 2016, when Detective Fidel Balan was already working on the case, there was a significant development in the investigation. Based on the evidence recovered at the crime scene back in 1990, police now knew that the perpetrator who committed the assaults on Lisa and Robin was a man with type O blood and blonde hair. Samples of DNA from more than 100 males were collected throughout the years since the murders. Detective Fidel Balan said that another 20 males had been tested since he had been put on the case. Detective Fidel Balan spent each day following up on leads, both new and old. Since Lisa and Robin's story was aired on America's Most Wanted in 2005, more than 150 leads poured in. Most of those led to dead ends, but Detective Fidel Balan checked them all out anyway. He even ranked them from the most promising to the least. Following those leads took him all over the country, and he got about 8 solid ones that caught his eye. This case Detective Fidel and Jan both believed was solvable, but until the killer would be caught, Jan was going to keep her doors locked. She didn't trust people. She always wondered what if the killer had been around at some point, or even if she knew him. As the investigation proceeded, a DNA sample in the case had been forwarded to the Combined DNA Index System, or simply COIDES, a national database of DNA profiles collected from felons convicted of serious crimes. Then sometime in 2016, a man was arrested for showing aggression towards his girlfriend's son. As a part of a standard procedure, his DNA was taken and recorded in the DNA database. Surprisingly, this man's DNA matched the sample found at the crime scene where Lisa and Robin were murdered. On September 28, 2016, the Cape Coral Police Department released a statement saying that there was a DNA match to the killer who was identified as a 60-year-old male named Joseph Zeiler, who hailed from North Fort Myers. On November 2016, Joseph was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the May 9, 1990 slayings of Robin and Lisa, as well as other felony charges. Assistant State Attorneys Daniel Feinberg, Stephanie Russell, and Abe Thornburg prosecuted the case, while Joseph was represented by Lee Hollander and Kevin Shirley. When the trial began, Joseph stated that he had suffered memory loss when a car struck his motorcycle along Pine Island Road a few years back, after which he was sent to a hospital. He said that he had a seriously fractured leg, a wound on his left foot, and a head injury, and hence he claimed that he couldn't remember anything about Lisa and Robin's murders. Joseph's former girlfriend, Bonnie Nicely, was called in to testify. She was questioned for about 90 minutes. Bonnie had been in a relationship with Joseph since about Memorial Day of 1990, until shortly after he was connected to the double homicide in November 2016. She said under oath that Joseph never had any memory issues, contrary to what he had told the authorities when they confronted him about the murders. As Bonnie made statements against Joseph, he kept staring at her during the testimony. She avoided eye contact and looked in the prosecutor's direction. Bonnie broke into tears when the courtroom played the recording of a cell phone call between Joseph and her while he was incarcerated. They played 3 recent calls between the couple. During the conversations, Joseph talked about having a backpack and making an escape. Bonnie said she was angry during one of the September 2016 calls, after she found out about the homicide allegations. She said that's when she broke off a relationship with Joseph. The calls played in the courtroom showed Joseph indicating that he would have to turn himself in for a separate crime, which he didn't disclose to Bonnie. "I will seriously be disappointed if you abandon me," Joseph warned Bonnie during one of the phone calls. He urged Bonnie to be ready and to have her bag packed as he was planning to run away with her. After the court discussed the separate phone calls, Bonnie read a letter which was written and sent to her by Joseph. The letter addressed the aggression towards her son, which led to the earlier 2016 arrest. Joseph, just hours prior to his conviction, took the stand to claim his innocence soon after his girlfriend told the jury about learning of the accusations, wiping tears and covering her face as she sobbed. As Joseph testified, he scrutinized Bonnie's sworn statements. Toward the beginning of questioning, Joseph said he didn't know either of the victims or Jan, Robin's mother. Kevin Shirley, Joseph's attorney, showed Joseph photos of the Cornell home. Joseph said he never saw the photos or Jan's home when the police interviewed him about the murders. As Joseph Zeiler testified, a series of letters he wrote recently to the Cornell family became the focus. Joseph Zeiler denied writing those letters and avoided answering related questions. But moments later he confessed to the writings, saying that he was only defending himself. In the letters he suggested a relative of his committed the slayings. When asked, Joseph said the letters weren't just addressed to Jan, but the entire family. Joseph then claimed to have had an intimate encounter with Jan in the past. He stated that he had slept with Jan in 1989. According to the letters, Joseph threatened to drag Jan and her family to the U.S. Supreme Court. As Joseph continued, he attempted to introduce documents allegedly linked to a case of his in Maryland, saying he was in court in that state at the time of Lisa and Robin's murders. He said there was a separate warrant for his arrest in May 1990 out of Maryland, and had another one in 1987 out of Chicago. Joseph said he had been convicted of 5 felonies in total, but he wasn't guilty of the assaults on Lisa and Robin. After Joseph was dismissed from questioning, prosecutors called in Jan Cornell. They addressed the alleged one-night intimate encounter she had with Joseph. Her voice shook as she stressed. She denied those allegations and said that she didn't know Joseph or how he got her address. When questioned about the threatening letters she received from Joseph, Jan said she reported the letters to authorities out of fear for her life. "I panicked because I didn't know how he got my real name and my address," she said. Lee Hollander, Joseph's attorney, argued that the analysis couldn't get a DNA match out of blonde hairs that were recovered and that Joseph's hair had never been blonde. Hollander said that the 3 beer cans and the adult toy found at the crime scene were never tested for any fingerprints or DNA samples. Abe Thornburg from the prosecution called Joseph's defense fiction and stated that science didn't back it up. "Only one person in 1 billion Earths shares this DNA," Thornburg said, adding that the state had proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt. More than 6 years after DNA matched him to the decades-old double homicide on Thursday, May 18, 2023, to convict Joseph Zeiler in the 1990 death of 11-year-old Robin Cornell and her babysitter, 32-year-old Lisa Story. Relatives of the victim sobbed and hugged each other as the court announced the verdict, while Joseph Zeiler, 60, appeared stoic and looked toward Lee Circuit Judge Robert Branning. Although Lisa and Robin were long gone, they still were alive in Jan's memory and blessings.
Ever thrown a fit or given me a hard time. She was pretty happy-go-lucky, liked to prank. She was a big prankster. And we did things at that time that we used to scare each other half to death. We'd hide behind stuff and jump out, and she was the worst one. We don't do that anymore because we just kind of have that natural, like, don't do that. But she did those kind of things and was very friendly. Robin had a lot of school friends, which amazingly enough, 23 years later, several of them still keep in contact with me. And these were just 11-year-old kids at the time, and now they're grown up, they're in their 30s, and they have children of their own, but they still keep in contact with me, and they've made their children know who Robin was, which is a very good feeling. It's a very good feeling to know that she touched people in a way which were just 11 years old, that they still think about her.
The person who ripped her heart out by murdering her two most loved ones was finally going to pay for his crimes. Como County, Texas is a land of rugged beauty and rich history, a place where the past and present converge in a dazzling display of sights, sounds, and flavors. Nestled in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, Como County's rolling hills, winding rivers, and lush valleys are places where the air is sweet and the pace of life is slow. Its rugged terrain and isolated canyons have been the setting for many a horror story, including the case we'll be exploring today. On June 14, 1981, the tranquility of Como County was shattered when the partially naked body of a woman was discovered in the grassy shoulder of Interstate 35 North, near a rest area south of New Braunfels in Como County. The area where the woman was found was barren and desolate, with nothing but an endless expanse of dry, dusty earth stretching out in all directions. As investigators combed through the area, they found a number of clues that only deepened the mystery. The woman had been shot 6 times in the head with a .25 caliber pistol, her body discarded like a piece of trash. An autopsy revealed bruising on her neck that indicated that she had been forcibly restrained. The attacker had held her in a grip of terror before firing the fatal shots. Despite extensive efforts to identify her, including fingerprint analysis and missing persons reports, the victim remained a Como County Jane Doe. The autopsy report revealed that even though she was found without clothes, there was no indication of her being assaulted. Because there was no further leads, she was buried in Como Cemetery in New Braunfels, Texas, leaving the mystery of her identity and the motive behind her killing unresolved. And just like that, the case went cold for years to come.
Our top story at 6, a local cold case going back to 1981 has new life tonight.
Nearly 3 decades after the Como County Jane Doe murder, the case was taken up by the Texas Rangers Unsolved Crimes Investigation Program, UCIP, in May 2008. Investigators delved into missing persons reports and compared them with the victim's description, leading them to a single name, Carol Deleon. Shockingly, Deleon's disappearance had not been reported until 2007, 26 years after the last time her family had heard from her. Investigators had determined that only one person similar to the victim's description had been reported missing in that time frame, and that person was Carol Deleon. Her family was shown a photo of Como County Jane Doe, and DNA testing confirmed what they had feared for so long. It was indeed Carol. The investigators reached out to her family and showed them a photo of 1981 Como County Jane Doe. The family immediately identified her. The San Antonio Police Department was notified, and in 2009, DNA testing further confirmed what they had feared for so long. It was indeed 18-year-old Carol, who was the victim buried for years as an unidentified Jane Doe in Como Cemetery. The mystery of her identity was finally solved, but the question of who killed her remained unanswered. Carol Deleon was a vibrant young woman with her whole life ahead of her. She was born in Bexar County, Texas on February 18, 1963, to Rodolfo Deleon and Ramona Vara. She had just graduated from Thomas Edison High School on May 28, 1981, and was looking forward to her next chapter of her life. In celebration of her graduation, Carol went out with some friends to a nightclub in San Antonio on June 3, 1981. Unfortunately, that would be the last time she was seen alive. Carol's family had tried to file a missing persons report after she disappeared, but the authorities didn't take it seriously at the time. Since she was 18 and no foul play was suspected, they assumed she had moved away, as she had mentioned it to them before. Her family didn't hear from her for years until her younger sister decided to file a report after failing to get in touch with her. The investigation into Carol Deleon's murder remained unsolved for decades. In 2019, 29 years after Deleon's body was discovered, a DNA profile was created from the fingernail scrapings collected during the autopsy. The profile was entered into the CODES system, but no matches were found. In 2019, another DNA sample was collected from Deleon's body and matched the DNA collected from the fingernail scrapings. The DNA was then submitted for genealogy testing, which identified 3 persons of interest, including 59-year-old Larry West. In November 2021, Texas Rangers visited West at his workplace in Converse, and he voluntarily gave investigators a swab of his DNA, according to an arrest warrant. West initially denied any involvement in Deleon's murder, but admitted to often going to bars in Bexar County to pick up younger women. Then, in March 2023, the Texas Ranger investigators received the DNA analysis report, pointing to West as the best match. And the probability that the DNA found on Deleon's body could be from someone else was nearly impossible. According to the arrest warrant, the investigators stated that Larry Allen West could not be excluded as the foreign contributor of this DNA profile. The probability of selecting an unrelated person at random who could be the contributor of this foreign DNA profile is approximately 1 in 422.1 quintillions. Larry Allen West was born on October 22, 1954 in Texas. Not much is known about his early life or upbringing. According to reports, West was a former truck driver and had worked at the same steel fabrication company for over 30 years. He was not a man to be trifled with. Investigators who delved into his past found a trail of violence and aggression. His first wife recounted a harrowing tale of abuse, claiming that he repeatedly assaulted her during their short-lived marriage of 30 days. As they dug deeper, investigators discovered that West had a pattern of targeting younger women. He was known to frequent bars and clubs in Bexar County, where he would try to pick up younger women. His behavior was predatory, and he seemed to take pleasure in the power dynamic that he was able to create. It was clear that West was not a man to be trusted. His ex-wife spoke of his anger and temper, describing him as a violent and unpredictable man. It was a sad and disturbing portrait of a man who seemed to take pleasure in the suffering of others. The fact that he had gone so many years without being caught was a testament to his cunning and his ability to blend into society. But justice had finally caught up to him, and he would be held accountable for his crimes. The case of Carol Deleon's murder is a reminder of how advancements in DNA technology can lead to the resolution of cold cases, even after many years have passed. Larry Allen West was finally arrested on Thursday, April 20th, 2023, after years of being free for the murder of Carol Deleon.
After more than 40 years, a San Antonio man is arrested and charged in the murder of Carol Joyce Deleon.
Online court records indicate that he was taken into custody and his bond was set at $125,000. The case of Carol Deleon's murder also drew attention to a string of similar cases that occurred between 1976 and 1981 along the Interstate 35 section of Texas. During that time, at least 22 murders of female and male hitchhikers and stranded motorists were reported in the area, leading authorities to believe that a serial killer might have been at work. Deleon's case was included in the list of the victims of the so-called I-35 murders, which also included the names of Deborah Jackson and Juanita Velasquez Mata, among others. Given West's connection to Deleon's murder, it is possible that he may have been involved in other killings during that time period. The authorities are currently looking into his potential involvement in the other unsolved cases along the I-35 section and are investigating whether West may have been a serial killer.
I know that justice is going to come. We've been suffering for over 40 years, not knowing what happened to my sister. The potential of what she could have been, what she could have done, will never be known. We were robbed of that. She was robbed of that.
Sandra Deleon, Carol Deleon's sister, expressed her family's long-awaited relief that her sister's killer had finally been brought to justice. Speaking about the arrest of Larry West, she said, "We've been suffering for over 40 years, not knowing what happened to my sister. The potential of what she could have been What she could have been will never be known. We were robbed of that. She was robbed of that. Sandra also hoped that Larry West would confess to his crime, giving her family some closure. She urged him to come forward and tell the truth, saying, "This is the chance before he leaves this earth to make his peace. Come forth, give the rest of the family peace. I know that justice is going to come in one form or another." For Sandra and her family, the news of West's arrest is bittersweet. While they are glad that the killer has been finally identified, they are also reminded of the pain and trauma that they have endured for decades. However, they are hopeful that this new development will bring some peace and closure to their family, allowing them to move forward with their lives. Liberty County, Georgia is one of the oldest counties in Georgia. On Friday, December 2, 2022, in the serene woods of the Portal Hunting Club, located in Liberty County, a chilling discovery awaited a group of hunters. Hidden amidst the trees were the partial remains of a white woman. It was clear that the woman had been dead for some time. The hunters also noticed a collection of clothing items beside the victim's remains. This included a dark blue long-sleeve shirt labeled Morona, a camisole top, light gray boy shorts, and white Amazon Essentials underwear. The hunters stood in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of this grim discovery. They recognized that they had become unwilling witnesses to a tragedy that had probably unfolded in these woods. Authorities swiftly responded to the distressing scene, their arrival marking the beginning of a harrowing investigation. As they carefully combed the area, their search unveiled an even more gruesome truth. Parts of the woman's dismembered body were scattered across the vast expanse of the hunting club property. The investigators were left perplexed, wondering about the circumstances that led to such a gruesome end. Every clue, however, seemed to elude them, for there was nothing on her lifeless form to offer even a glimpse of her identity. With great care, the remains were carefully collected and transported for forensic testing, which held the promise of uncovering the truth behind this tragic case. As the forensic testing progressed, it revealed that the woman had met her demise approximately 1 to 2 weeks before being discovered. However, the pressing task at hand was to unveil her identity. They recognized that by understanding who she was, they could begin to piece the story of how her life had come to such a tragic end. In December 2022, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took a bold step in its pursuit of justice. Determined to unveil the identity of the mysterious woman, they enlisted the expertise of a talented forensic artist. With precision and care, the artist crafted a lifelike rendering, capturing the essence of the unknown woman's features. On December 13th, the authorities shared the artist's rendering with the public, hoping someone would recognize her. Alongside the sketch, they revealed that she appeared to be around 5'9" to 5'10" tall, weighing between 190 to 200 pounds. Remarkably, she had no discernible scars or tattoos that could aid in her identification. With anticipation, law enforcement urged individuals who might know the woman to come forward. The public's help, they believed, was instrumental in giving her a name, a history, and ultimately justice. However, as days turned into weeks, the weight of the disappointment settled upon the investigators. No one stepped forward with any information, and the woman remained a face without a name. In early 2023, with the investigation into the unidentified woman reaching a critical juncture, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation turned to a powerful ally, the FBI. Together they embarked on a groundbreaking approach to propel the case forward and uncover the truth. The stage was set for a remarkable collaboration between forensic scientists and genealogy DNA experts. They extracted DNA samples from the woman's remains and created a profile. Armed with a genetic blueprint, they embarked on a quest to trace her roots. By going through public and government records, they painstakingly constructed family trees, following each branch in pursuit of potential relatives. One by one, possible family members were identified and approached by investigators. Their stories, memories, and connections held the key to unveiling the woman's true identity. With utmost care, DNA swabs were taken from these individuals. Following this, the samples were then compared to the DNA profile obtained from the remains. And then on May 11, 2023, a breakthrough emerged from the shadows. The unknown woman, whose existence had been shrouded in mystery, was finally bestowed with the name Mindi Kassotis. The investigators rejoiced. Their collective efforts had finally yielded good results. This breakthrough brought investigators closer to resolving the case and finding answers about her fate. As investigators looked into the woman's background, a fascinating story unfolded. It was discovered that she was a native of New Orleans, and at the time of her demise, she was 40 years old. Mindi was a woman of achievement and ambition. She had a passion for writing and a successful business of her own. Mindi obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree from Armstrong State University and went on to earn her master's degree in Public and International Affairs from Virginia Tech. In October 2016, she married a man named Nicholas Kassotis at Morovan Park in Leesburg, Virginia. Mindi's husband Nicholas had a different path in life. He served as a reserve Judge Advocate General Corps officer, starting his career in 2006 and eventually reaching the rank of Lieutenant Commander by September 1, 2015. However, his time in the Navy came to an end in August 2019. Following a honeymoon in Sonoma, California, the couple settled in Alexandria, Virginia. However, at the time of Mindi's untimely death, they had relocated to Savannah, Georgia. The wooded area where Mindi's remains were discovered lay approximately 45 minutes away from their Savannah residence. The proximity of the crime scene to their home only intensified the intrigue surrounding Mindi's fate and raised numerous questions for the investigators to unravel. Meanwhile, news of Mindi Kassotis' tragic demise sent shockwaves through the online community, where friends and acquaintances expressed their grief and disbelief. Those who had shared precious moments with her during their school years took to social media to convey their sorrow and fond memories. Under circumstances yet undisclosed to the public, authorities focused their suspicions on Nicholas, the husband of Mindi, regarding her tragic death. So on May 12, 2023, Nicholas was apprehended and taken into custody in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation swiftly laid multiple charges against him, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and removal of body parts from the crime scene. On Friday, May 19, 2023, Nicholas found himself standing in a courtroom, facing an extradition hearing. The judge wasted no time in ordering his return to Georgia, the state where the heinous crime had taken place, and so Nicholas was promptly extradited to Georgia. 1 week later, on Saturday, May 27, 2023, Nicholas again stood before a judge within the confines of the Liberty County Jail in Georgia. The air was thick with anticipation, as the formal charges were read aloud, leaving no room for doubt. However, any glimmer of hope for release vanished as the judge sternly denied him bail. With the legal proceedings intensifying, Nicholas was referred to the esteemed Superior Court, where his fate would be ultimately decided. At the moment, the lingering question hangs in the air. What could have driven a man to allegedly take the life of his own wife? The motive remains shrouded in mystery. The path ahead is also uncertain, and the outcome of the legal proceedings would ultimately determine whether Nicholas is truly responsible for his wife's untimely death. Imagine working the graveyard shift as the watchman of a large working boat used for tuna fishing. You're alone at night, walking the piers and inspecting the boat, ensuring no malicious individuals are around to vandalize or steal from the large vessel. That was what Joseph Fernandes was doing on the Saturday night of July 7, 1990, before he was stabbed to death. The 69-year-old worked as the night watchman aboard a boat called the Sea Quest. He and his wife immigrated from Madeira, Portugal, shortly after their marriage and settled in San Diego, making it their home. They started a family in California, having children and grandchildren who adored Fernandes immensely. His granddaughter, Mary Montgomery, was especially attached to her beloved grandfather. She lived right across the street from her grandparents and enjoyed spending time with them every day. While Fernandes loved and adored his family, he also had a passion for his career in tuna fishing. He would even bring his grandchildren along sometimes. Mary stated, "I remember as a little girl, on his days off, we would come down to the harbor to spend time, hang around the boats, and every now and then he would take me tagging along with him." Those were some of Mary's favorite childhood memories. When Fernandes retired from fishing, he continued his passion for the trade and took up a job as a night watchman of one of the boats, the Sea Quest, which was docked at the G Street Pier, but this would lead to his unfortunate end. On July 8, 1990, 4-year-old Mary was devastated to hear that her grandfather would not be coming home from work. Fernandes was found that morning aboard the Sequest, not breathing and covered in blood. The night watchman had been stabbed to death in an apparent robbery during a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. When the murder was reported on the news shortly after, Mary remembers being very confused. As she watched the news and pictures of her grandfather holding her as a baby appeared, she shouted to her parents with glee. In an interview in July of 2022, Mary said she remembered pointing at the TV and saying, "Mom, Mom, Grandpa and I are on TV. When is he going to come home? He's got to see this." It was then that the young granddaughter realized that something was very wrong. Fernandes was found by the watchman, who arrived to take over after his shift was supposed to end. The relief watchman came on board and couldn't find him, so he asked a friend to help him look. When the friend came and they searched the boat, they found his body. The pair immediately phoned the police to report what they found. Homicide Detective Jim Duncan was one of the first officers on the scene. Fernandes was found at the port side of the boat in a fish storage area, hidden beneath plastic sheathing and ship equipment. Police said Fernandes was apparently attacked in the ship's galley, and his body dropped to the lower deck. Upon interviewing the other boat owners among the docks, Duncan learned that things were often stolen from the boats at night. One fisherman, John Brown, told him that he kept his dog on board the boat at night because too many things were constantly being stolen. Upon further investigation, Duncan learned that Fernandes's car, a 1984 white Nissan 200SX, was missing from the scene, likely stolen by the murderer. Within a few weeks, the car was recovered in Los Angeles. It appeared to be sold to people who were not involved in the murder. The killer only accepted cash, leaving no way for detectives to trace them. With their biggest piece of evidence leading to a dead end, the case went cold soon after this. It would be 32 years before detectives reopened the case in July of 2022. With a fresh set of eyes, they were finally able to put new theories together, which would lead them to a suspect, Gregorio Arturo Quezada Monsivais. The problem was, Monsivais had fled to Mexico shortly after the murder. Tony Johnson, a senior investigator with the DA's office, explained what prompted the team to look at him as a suspect. There was a lot of evidence pointing to Monsivais they collected over the years. Police originally believed the murder was a robbery gone wrong. While this may have been true, new detectives on the reopened cold case theorized that it could have been an anger attack. Apparently, Fernandes had refused work to Monsivais prior to the incident, which may have sparked an argument leading to Fernandes's death. Police also noted that several people reported seeing a man who matched Monsivais' description running from the scene right about the time of the murder. Over the years, Monsivais also mentioned he was involved in a murder to at least one friend, who would later confirm this with police. Lastly, after sharing his image with the people who purchased Fernandes's stolen car, they positively identified Monsivais. With this collected evidence, Johnson and his team put the pieces together that would finally bring Fernandes's killer one step closer to justice. In April of 2023, Monsivais was finally located and arrested in the Sinaloa region of Mexico. After all these years, Fernandes's family can finally get the closure they have been yearning for the last 3 decades. His daughter Mary has stated that she felt reassured to know that the professionals in the district attorney's office did not give up on the fight for justice for her grandfather. Monsivais still awaits his trial, but Mary and the rest of the Fernandes family believes that the killer will be put behind bars for good. Albany is a city in southwest Georgia that is bustling with life. From the Flint River that the city is located on, to the rhinos and cheetahs at the Albany Zoo, the city attracts many tourists and is a wonderful place for those who call it home. But although it is filled with beauty, Albany also has had its fair share of dark secrets. 46-year-old Yolanda Rountree was an outspoken, hard-working woman who was dedicated to her family and a staple in her community. Yolanda was known by many for her generosity and her infectious laughter. A devoted mother and grandmother, Yolanda would give the shirt off her back for her family and friends. She was the matriarch of the family, with daughters, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren who looked up to her and relied on her. As a woman who was loved by all, no one expected her death to come by such gruesome means. Yolanda resided in a relatively safe community located in Albany, Georgia. She resided in apartment 403 of the Wild Pines complex. Her neighbors always remembered her for being out and about on a daily basis. Being the social butterfly that she was, it was rare that Yolanda went long periods without conversing with her family, friends, and neighbors. That's why on the evening of Friday, November 6, 2009, her daughter Katie Freeman and niece Danielle Woods found it odd that they had not spoken to her all day. When Yolanda did not answer the continuous calls to her home phone by her daughters and nieces, Katie and Danielle decided to stop by and check on their beloved mother and aunt. Little did the cousins know that they were about to experience the worst event of their lives. As Katie and Danielle entered the home and called out for Yolanda, they received no reply. Walking through the apartment, Katie came to her mother's bedroom, where she would behold a horrendous sight that she would never forget. Katie found her mother Yolanda's body lying on the ground, halfway out of her closet. She was covered in a sheet that was stained with red and drenched in blood. She screamed and Danielle came running to see what happened. After their initial shock, Katie ran to the home phone and dialed 911. Officers arrived shortly thereafter and immediately determined that this was a homicide. Yellow caution tape was placed around the apartment, and crime scene investigators were called. It appeared that Yolanda was stabbed to death before the killer attempted to shove her into the closet. When the killer could not get the body all the way into the closet, they lazily covered Yolanda's corpse with a sheet before making their escape. The autopsy determined that the cause of death was from stab wounds to the abdomen. In the apartment, detectives began the forensic analysis and tried to get as much information as they could from friends, family, and neighbors. One thing that Katie noted was that Yolanda's car, a white four-door 97 Buick LeSabre Custom, was missing. Police officers began their search for the missing vehicle and found it in less than one day. A woman by the name of Sarah Lynn Daniels had called in an abandoned vehicle to the police on the day of the murder. Daniels found the car parked behind her home. Not knowing the police would be searching for this vehicle in a homicide case, Daniels reported the suspicious vehicle. When officers went to the vehicle, it was confirmed to belong to Yolanda Rountree. Police took their car to the impound lot to dust for fingerprints, scan for blood, and look for any key evidence associated with the murder. Even with the evidence taken from Yolanda's apartment and from her stolen vehicle, detectives could not conjure up enough evidence to locate a suspect. Weeks, months, and years went by with no leads in the case. Yolanda's family suffered through the years, not knowing who could have taken their bright and joyous matriarch from their beloved family. The case eventually went cold until February 2023, when it was reopened and detectives pleaded with the public for information. "I want the killer caught," Yolanda's daughter and Katie said in a press conference in early 2023. "I want the killer off the streets." Katie would further say that after all these years, she just wanted closure so she could sleep well at night. Detective Terrence Bryant with the Albany Police Department confirmed in February of 2023 that they had established new evidence which was planned to be sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab for DNA testing. This, on top of tips that flooded in after their public plea for information, would be what finally put a name to Yolanda's killer. On April 13th of 2023, Annie Dolores Fritz, age 64, was arrested for the murder of Yolanda Rountree. Fritz currently sits in the Dougherty County Jail. On top of murder, the other charges she faces are aggravated assault with a cutting tool and tampering with evidence. While the trial has yet to begin, no further information has been made public, such as the motive behind the murder. Yolanda left behind a legacy for her family they would not soon forget. The devoted mother and grandmother proved to her family that perseverance would prevail. Katie and the rest of Yolanda's family did not give up over the last 13 years. At last they can start piecing together the closure that they have been long awaiting. Katie and others plan to sit in on the trial to ensure that Fritz is locked away for her terrible crimes. Although the killer is believed to have been caught, investigators still encourage the public to reach out with any information they may have. If you know anything about the murder of Yolanda, please call the Albany Police Department at 229-431-2100 or Crime Stoppers at 229-436-TIPS. Kokomo is a city in Indiana and the county seat of Howard County, Indiana, United States. The citizens of this small city describe it as a peaceful place to raise a family. Even though Kokomo is a small town, the crime rate here is quite worrisome, and a 20-year-old boy named Chad Rouse became one of the unfortunate ones who fell victim to crimes here. Chad Nicholas Rouse was born in Kokomo, Howard County, Indiana, USA, on February 8, 1986, to the married couple Athena L. Rouse and Frank Rouse. Chad, along with his sister Heather Rouse, was raised by his parents. He and Heather had a happy and healthy childhood and were later joined by their half-sister, Holly Rouse. Chad had attended Kokomo High School, and by 2006, when he was entering his adulthood, he had started working in the city of Kokomo Park's maintenance department. Chad was in the best years of his life, but all that ended on an unfortunate November day, on the morning of November 15, 2006, shortly after 10 a.m., Kokomo Police Department officers responded to a call for a reported shooting in an apartment at 1426 South Armstrong Street, near South Washington and West Steffenbaugh. When the detectives arrived at the crime scene, they found Chad in a pool of blood. He wasn't responding. Chad was pronounced dead at the scene. An autopsy at the time confirmed Chad died from a single gunshot wound to the back. His death was ruled a homicide. Chad was shot by an intruder. The police believed that robbery was the motive. As the police questioned the people around, a female witness came forward and gave some important details about the incident. She told the police an unidentified black male had entered the home to rob the residence, leading to a fight between Chad and the suspect. The man had a handgun and held Chad and a woman at gunpoint. During the struggle, Chad was shot in the back. Services for Chad were held at Eller's Mortuary, Webster Street Chapel, 3400 South Webster Street. Over the years, the Kokomo Police Department followed up on numerous tips and leads, but nothing helped. With no potential suspects, as the investigation started to lose pace and the case went cold, Chad's family had started celebrating the 20 years that he spent with them by releasing lanterns on his death anniversaries and balloons on his birthdays every year. It wasn't until February 2023 when Chad's case was reopened. The police called for help in finding out who killed 20-year-old Chad Rouse in Kokomo. That same year, investigators indicated that they were close to solving the case and had narrowed it down to a very small group of people. After 16 years of living in sorrow of losing their beloved Chad and not knowing who took his life, Chad's family was now close to getting closure. The police identified a 48-year-old man named Kevin Maddox and a 36-year-old woman named Amber Brigham as the suspects in Chad's murder. Investigators did not reveal what ultimately led them to Kevin and Amber, the suspects. However, more details in the case could be expected to be released. when the probable cause affidavits would be filed through the Howard County Prosecutor's Office. On Friday, May 26, 2023, a Howard County grand jury indicted the two suspects in connection with the case. On Tuesday, May 30, 2023, the Howard Superior Second Court granted arrest warrants for Kevin and Amber. After warrants were issued for both suspects, police arrested Kevin in Indianapolis and Amber in Miami County, nearly 17 years after Chad's murder. Agencies such as FBI Indianapolis Violent Crimes Task Force, Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, and the Miami County Sheriff's Department all came together to work Chad's case and put the culprits behind bars where they belonged. Kevin Maddox was charged for committing a murder, robbery resulting in serious bodily injury, and conspiracy to commit robbery resulting in serious bodily injury, while Amber Brigham was charged for conspiracy to commit robbery resulting in serious bodily injury and aiding, including or causing robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. Kevin and Amber are both imprisoned at the Howard County Jail.
Tonight, 2 people are under arrest, and they're accused in the death of a man in Kokomo that occurred back in 2006. It was just a few months ago that the police in Kokomo renewed their call for help in finding out who killed Chad Rouse. Someone shot him in the back in November of 2006, but police had never been able to figure out who was responsible. However, now Kokomo police tell us that they have made an arrest with people in connection with that death, and that arrest was made just last week. Kevin Maddox is charged with murder as well as robbery. Amber Brigham is now charged with conspiracy to commit robbery as well as aiding, inducing, or causing robbery.
While Kevin is being held without a bond, Amber is on a $250,000 cash bond with no 10%, meaning that Amber would not have the option to get out on bail even if she could pay the 10% of her total bond amount. Therefore, Amber and Kevin would remain in jail for the whole duration of their trial. Chad's family said they never thought this day would come. The family was excited to potentially be one step closer to justice. But they said this was not over yet. We are happy, but still a little scared.
In 16 and a half years, we've missed a lot of good times with him.
We definitely need people to still talk, said Chad's sister, Heather Rouse.
We're happy, but we're still a little nervous, scared. We definitely need people to still talk.
For more than 16 long years, Athena had suffered the loss of her son, Chad. But now she has finally found some peace.
I was like, is this for real? Is this really happening? I was just like dazed. I didn't know. I was like, I'm not going to believe it till I get to the police station and they tell me.
Ithaca is a city and the county seat of Tompkins County, New York. Situated on the southern shore of Cayuga Lake in the Finger Lakes region of New York, Ithaca is the largest community in the Ithaca Metropolitan Statistical Area. Ithaca is famous for its many waterfalls, more than 100 within 10 miles of downtown. Places such as New York City, Niagara Falls, Rochester, and Philadelphia are all within close vicinity of Ithaca. But on a darker note, Ithaca isn't considered a very safe place. Ithaca isn't considered a very safe city. Ithaca has one of the highest crime rates in America. Living in this city full of risk was a 26-year-old man named David W. Malcom, whose life met an appalling end in 1987. Although details about David W. Malcolm's birth date and early life had always remained unknown, his friends knew a lot about the young adult version of him. David was a 1984 Cornell University College of Agriculture and Life Sciences graduate and a Connecticut native. His parents died when he was in his late teens. After that, he and his sister, Hope, were taken in by a family in New Canaan, Connecticut. A former female housemate of David described him as someone who loved life and was one of the most giving people. He also had an enthusiasm for music and loved to dance. According to friends, David was a spontaneous and playful person who loved the outdoors. He also had traveled extensively after college. He toured India and the Far East, where he became interested in meditation. He also had a wonderful sense of humor. Some of his favorite hobbies included playing the piano, skiing, and hiking. One spring, he worked on the eastern shore of Long Island, teaching students about marshes and wildlife. He was the best of what young people can be. He was idealistic, sensitive, warm, and very bright. He was a wonderful role model for kids and was wise beyond his years. By 1987, the 26-year-old David was living at 702 East State Street, Ithaca, New York. At the time, David was a staff member at the Red Cross shelter on West Court Street, which was then known as the Red Cross Emergency Community Shelter. This shelter housed people who were homeless. David was hired full-time at the shelter in 1986, but he had been working there part-time since 1984. He had also held a number of other counseling positions in the city. He had worked in a psychiatric home, and before that, he used to counsel middle and high school students on a variety of issues and problems. On February 11, 1987, David arrived at the shelter for a 24-hour shift, expecting a normal day, unaware of the tragedy that was just around the corner. That February night passed silently, but when the sun was up, and about on the morning of February 12th, David's lifeless body was recovered in the very same shelter he worked at. The authorities were informed without any delay. When the investigators from the Ithaca Police Department arrived at the scene, they found David's body almost completely covered in blood. They also noticed multiple stab wounds on his body. Initially, they believed that he was murdered sometime during the afternoon of February 11, 1987. But an autopsy report stated that David was killed in the early hours of February 12, 1987. The detectives were unsure of the exact time and date of David's death, but what they did know for sure was that David was stabbed to death while working at the shelter, and that he had stab wounds from his waist to his neck. He was stabbed multiple times with a sharp object. The police didn't disclose what type of weapon was used and whether they had recovered it or not. As the investigation into David's death began, the detectives immediately focused on a male coworker as their prime suspect. But after a detailed check on his whereabouts and background, he was ruled out as a suspect. David's friends were highly depressed and grieved his untimely departure. One of David's flatmates said, "This is more than a death. This is a tragedy." On February 15, 1987, about 200 people gathered for a 2-hour service in Sage Chapel at Cornell University. At the memorial, relatives, friends, co-workers, and acquaintances came to remember him as a dedicated, sensitive, and selfless man committed to helping Ithaca's poor, homeless, and oppressed. A relative said David was a rare human being. He was intelligent, sensitive, and caring. He had great sympathy for everyone in distress. The investigation into David's case led the police nowhere, and the case joined the pile of many other unsolved cold cases in 1988. Even though the case went cold, it was briefly investigated at times in 1990 and 2010, until being shelved again that same year. However, in September 2015, the investigation began again, using a combination of DNA investigative leads in search of some finality. By May 2016, Ithaca police announced they were pursuing new leads. Over 100 leads were approached and interrogated in the investigation. Several witnesses were interviewed in multiple states as well. While the investigation was still ongoing, Ithaca Mayor Savanti Myrick issued a proclamation and declared February 11, 2017, which was the 30th anniversary of the murder, David Malcolm Day. The proclamation said that David always embraced life with a huge heart, a warm smile, and absolute kindness towards all. Over 3 decades later, on Friday, May 26, 2023, police in upstate New York announced that they had finally determined who was responsible for David's murder. But they chose not to disclose the identity of the killer. The police said that with the help of DNA evidence, they discovered the murderer's identity and that justice will remain elusive because the killer passed away in 2019. Federal, state, county, and local law enforcement agencies helped with the investigation over the past 7+ years. After almost 36 years, the long befuddling case was finally solved. The killer was identified as an ex-boyfriend of a teenage girl who arrived at the Red Cross Emergency Center for help the day before David's body was found. The girl, who hailed from the town of Newfield, sought refuge at the shelter after she ran away from her abusive and violent ex-boyfriend. The ex-boyfriend showed up at the Red Cross after the girl arrived and demanded to know where she was. David, who was then there, refused to give the ex-boyfriend any information and he was killed protecting the girl who could potentially be harmed if he didn't stop her ex-boyfriend. The police praised David for his heroic actions of not disclosing the whereabouts of the young teen, which sadly cost him his life. When David was killed, Deputy Chief Vincent Monticello was a young street cop at the Ithaca Police Department. The case had always been on his mind. When he stepped into the role as Deputy Chief in the Ithaca Police Department, he took it as an opportunity to take another look at David's unsolved case. Ithaca Police Deputy Chief Vincent Monticello met with David's family and apologized for not solving the case sooner. Many of the tools, training, and resources used today to solve homicides were not available to investigators in 1987. This was a challenging case for investigators in 1987, who were working the case with limited resources, the IPD wrote in a release. Spanaway, Washington is a serene suburban community nestled in Pierce County. However, it was in this very place that a shocking discovery was made on the midnight of March 21, 2002. The lifeless body of a white woman, stripped bare of clothing, lay motionless on the side of the road along the 1500 block of 74th Avenue East. As the police hurried to the scene, uncertainty clouded their minds as they approached, unsure of what awaited them. The sight that unfolded before their eyes left them staggered. It was obvious that the woman had met a gruesome fate. Now the officers grappled with the haunting questions. Who was she, and what events had led to her demise? Undeterred by the lack of clues, the detectives remained steadfast in their quest for truth. They combed the surrounding area, leaving no corner unexamined, hoping to unearth any piece of evidence that could offer a glimpse into the mysterious puzzle they were trying to solve. Yet despite their tireless efforts, the scene revealed nothing, as if it held the secrets close, refusing to give up its truth. The absence of visible marks on the victim's body struck the detectives as perplexing. It led them to believe that she had likely met her tragic end somewhere else, and her lifeless form had then been callously abandoned on the side of the road. Recognizing the need for further investigation, they made the decision to transport her from the scene for a thorough examination. The detectives knew that this examination held the potential to unlock the truth they sought. The autopsy conducted on the woman revealed a grim truth. She had met her demise through strangulation. During the autopsy, the team at the Pierce County Medical Examiner's Office also carefully collected foreign DNA sample from her body, knowing that it could hold vital clues crucial to solving the case. In addition to this, they also examined the victim's fingerprints. Through their work, they were able to uncover her true identity. The woman's name was Sharon Van Gilder. Sharon's true identity brought a sense of relief to the investigators, but it also opened up a Pandora's box of questions. Who was Sharon? And what secrets did her life hold? Driven by the thirst for answers, the detectives delved into Sharon's background, and they discovered she was a 39-year-old devoted mother of 2 children. Sharon's roots could be traced back to Umpqua, Washington. However, details about her early life remain scarce. Those who had the privilege of knowing her described her as kind and caring. She held a special place within her community, where she was known and loved by many. Her untimely death left an irreplaceable void in the lives of those who had cherished her. After getting to know all these, the detectives were spurred on by a renewed sense of purpose. Their mission was clear: to seek justice for her and bring solace to her grieving loved ones. The investigation into Sharon's death took a gripping turn when detectives uncovered a significant lead. It was revealed that she had last been seen leaving a bar in Tacoma with a man named Miguel Angel Urbano Vasquez. This discovery immediately placed Miguel under suspicion, triggering a determined manhunt by the authorities. Meanwhile, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab worked diligently to gather more evidence. DNA samples obtained from the crime scene held immense significance, serving as a vital link that needed to be connected to Miguel's DNA. The stakes were high, and the laboratory team labored tirelessly to make the crucial comparison. The outcome of this analysis could determine if Miguel was, indeed, the perpetrator of this heinous act. However, apprehending Miguel proved to be a challenging task. He cunningly evaded capture, disappearing without a trace, and managing to escape to Mexico. Despite the detectives' best efforts, they were unable to locate him. Miguel's flight to Mexico presented a formidable obstacle, leaving the detectives at a standstill. With this, the road to justice seemed even more uncertain. As the days turned into months, the investigation into Sharon's tragic death gradually lost its momentum. Clues evaporated, leads ran dry, and the case sank into the abyss of unsolved mysteries. This left Sharon's grieving loved ones burdened with the unyielding sorrow and aching for closure. They grappled with the haunting question, would the truth ever emerge, and would justice ever be served? Meanwhile, Miguel lived his life unburdened. He enjoyed his liberty, but was much unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon as the law silently prepared to make its move. In 2012, the formation of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Unit brought renewed hope to Sharon's unsolved murder case. Detective Tim Cobell took on the challenge, pouring his heart and soul into the investigation. During his thorough probe, Tim made a startling discovery. 2 abuse cases had occurred in Tacoma around the same time as Sharon's murder, and both crimes were linked to the same perpetrator, Miguel. The first victim reported being assaulted with a wrench and taken advantage of in a Lincoln district garage in June 2002. Just 2 months later, another woman came forward, recounting how she was abused in the same garage before managing to escape. In a twist of fate, the Tacoma detectives who had worked on the 2 cases were unaware of Miguel's connection to Sharon's murder. Consequently, they had failed to submit the DNA from the cases to the state crime lab for comparison. Detective Tim's confidence soared as he sensed he was finally on the right track. Anxiously, he sent the DNA samples from Sharon's murder and the 2 other cases for testing, eagerly awaiting the results. In late April 2012, his suspicions were confirmed. Miguel was responsible for all 3 crimes. However, the investigation didn't halt at this. Several months later, detectives made yet another significant breakthrough, linking Miguel to an additional case that occurred in October 2002. The victim shared a harrowing account of how she had been enticed into a car by 2 individuals offering drugs. When she refused their demands for pleasure in exchange for money, they turned violent and took advantage of her at knife point. The DNA evidence recovered from this crime scene matched the samples from the 2 earlier assault cases and Sharon's murder, solidifying the connection. The mounting evidence painted a chilling portrait of Miguel's depravity, underscoring the depths of his atrocities. Tim and his fellow detectives understood that their work was far from over. They knew they needed to find Miguel. The Pierce County Prosecutor's Office swiftly filed charges against Miguel and issued a warrant for his arrest. However, the detectives faced a daunting challenge, as they did not know Miguel's whereabouts in Mexico. Undeterred, the detectives embarked on an intense search, determined to bring him to justice. Despite the passage of time and numerous setbacks, their perseverance never wavered. In 2019, a breakthrough came when the FBI provided information on Miguel's location. With a renewed hope, the detectives took immediate action, navigating the complex process of securing the required paperwork for Miguel's extraction. It was a long and difficult journey, but their commitment paid off. After 4 years, all the necessary documents were processed, clearing the path for Miguel's capture. Collaborating closely with Mexican authorities, the FBI orchestrated Miguel's arrest on March 14, 2023, marking the end of his prolonged evasion of justice. Currently, the detectives are diligently working towards extraditing Miguel to Washington to face trial for his heinous crime. His arrest has brought a renewed sense of hope and closure to Sharon's family and friends, offering some solace after enduring years of uncertainty and anguish. Newman is a charming city located in the heart of Coweta County, Georgia. With a population of approximately 40,000 residents, it is a thriving community that seamlessly blends modern amenities with its rich history. Newman is a place where time seems to slow down, and life is lived at a more leisurely pace. It is a place where you can sit on your front porch and watch the world go by, or take a stroll through the town square and enjoy the quaint shops and restaurants. However, despite its peaceful atmosphere, Newman was not immune to crime. On September 3, 2015, Emilio Martinez Sanchez, a 28-year-old man, was shot and robbed on Glen Street, just a mile away from his home. The news of his crime shook the community, and it was a reminder that even in a place as idyllic as Newman, crime still could happen. Emilio Martinez Sanchez had just finished a lovely dinner with his family before he set off on his nightly walk. The night was quiet and the streets were empty as he went for a stroll from his sister's house where he lived. He took his time enjoying the cool breeze on his face and the sound of crickets chirping in the distance. Little did he know that fate had other plans for him that night. As he turned onto Glen Street, half a mile away from his sister's house, he noticed 3 shadowy figures lurking in the distance. At first, he tried to avoid them, thinking they were up to no good. But before he could take another step, the trio had spotted him, and they were closing in fast. Emilio's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to run, but it was too late. The robbers had caught up with him, and they demanded that he hand over his wallet and phone. After they took Emilio's wallet, things took a violent turn. Without warning, one of the robbers pulled out a gun and aimed it at Emilio's stomach. Emilio froze in terror as the sound of gunfire echoed through the night. He fell to the ground, writhing in agony as the robbers fled the scene. In a desperate attempt to stay alive, Emilio crawled to a nearby porch and knocked on the door. Nancy Gibbs, the homeowner, was startled awake by the sound of the knock, but she had no idea what awaited her on the other side. As she opened the door, she was met with a horrifying sight. Emilio lay on the ground, clutching his stomach and bleeding profusely. She tried talking to him, but he didn't know English very well, so she quickly called for help, but it was too late. Emilio was rushed to the Atlanta Medical Center, but died soon after from his injuries. Police had tried asking him about the person who shot him, but Emilio could not answer due to the language barrier. The news of Emilio's death sent shockwaves through the community. People were outraged that someone could be so callous and take another's life over a few possessions. The police worked tirelessly to bring the perpetrators to justice, but the case remained unsolved for a long time. After the tragic killing of Emilio Martinez Sanchez, the case went cold for nearly 4 years until a jail informant came forward with new information in 2018. According to Assistant District Attorney Robert Meridian, law enforcement was able to corroborate the information based on admissions made. Acting on valuable information, the U.S. Marshals Eastern Arkansas Fugitive Task Force, in collaboration with the Jonesboro Police Department's Street Crimes Unit, swiftly located 23-year-old Quintarius Finch after receiving a warrant related to an ongoing homicide investigation. In a significant development, the Jonesboro Police Department successfully apprehended him on March 20, 2019 at the Garden Manor Apartments located in North Jonesboro. He was then extradited to Georgia following his arrest. Finch had a troubled life. In addition to collecting the loot following the robberies, he endured injuries and acquired scars as a direct consequences of his involvement in those criminal acts. On January 2, 2019, just 2 months before his arrest, he and his brother Cedric were shot during a robbery of a residence at 3516 Galaxy Street in Jonesboro. In the same robbery, a 16-year-old boy, Malcom Jemison, was shot dead. Finch's injuries were life-threatening as he had multiple gunshot wounds. One shot hit his kidney, liver, and vena cava, a large vein that carries deoxygenated blood. After his arrest, Finch and the other suspect involved in the case provided evidence to prosecutors. Based on the information that the detectives had collected so far, on June 15, 2021, they were able to successfully arrest another person, Devontae Latraz Johnson, involved in the killing of Emilio Martinez. It was a cold case for nearly 4 years, which made it very hard, but Lieutenant Chris Robinson did a great job helping put enough evidence together to get justice for Martinez's family, Meridian said. Not every cold case in the world gets solved, and there was a time the victim's family was worried they'd never know. We're glad at the end of the day we could provide justice for them 8 years later. On March 27, 2023, Devontae Latraz Johnson admitted guilt to felony murder and attempted armed robbery in the 2015 death of Emilio Sanchez Martinez, and Judge Emery Palmer pronounced a life sentence, but with a possibility of parole in 30 years. Speaking on behalf of the Martinez family, Vanessa Gonzalez, Emilio's sister, expressed relief about the closure of the case, but also felt remorse for Johnson's family. Today, as the judge read the sentence, I could hear the sniffles coming from where Johnson's family was sitting, as if someone was crying, and I felt remorse for them, she said. I still ask myself if Johnson felt any kind of remorse for Emilio's family, knowing we would never hear his voice, his loud and happy laughter. For you to treat Emilio the way you did. You shot him and left him alone looking for help. He was an amazing human being that didn't deserve that. The investigation into the killing of Emilio Martinez Sanchez was a long and difficult process. It involved tireless work from law enforcement and the cooperation of those involved in the case. It ultimately resulted in justice for the victim's family. Although it can never undo the tragic loss they experienced, the tragic death of Emilio Martinez Sanchez reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of coming together as a community to support one another. Keystone Islands is a neighborhood in the city of North Miami, Florida, United States. It lies just north of Sans Souci Estates and south of Eastern Shores. Back in 1961, this neighborhood witnessed the murder of a 53-year-old man named Joseph DiMare. Little is known about the early life of Joseph DiMare, except that he was born in 1908 and raised in the city of Boston. Together with his younger brothers, they embarked on a venture of selling produce from pushcarts. Their humble partnership soon transformed into a thriving business empire as they expanded into domestic and foreign produce farming, importation, and distribution. As time passed, Joseph's ambition and hard work propelled him toward success and wealth. He was a gentleman, but he always worked. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Richard DiMare, one of Joseph's sons, recalled his father. Joseph lost his wife to cancer in 1956 and was a widower with 4 children, 3 college-aged boys and a young girl, in 1959 when he met and married a woman named Frances. Joseph's heart was mended by the companionship of Frances, who happened to be 20 years his junior. Together with Joseph's young daughter, the couple settled into the serene surroundings of Keystone Island in North Miami. While Joseph's sons resided on campus, they maintained a close connection with their father, frequently visiting and keeping in touch. Life seemed content, until an unexpected turn of events disrupted their harmonious existence. March 24, 1961, marked a turning point in Joseph DiMare's family. On the evening of that day, Frances, Joseph's wife, rushed into a gas station in Sans Souci Estates, her voice trembling as she called the police to deliver the devastating news. Her husband had been killed. The events she recounted painted a chilling picture of what unfolded that fateful night. Frances explained to the police that she and Joseph had left their home to go to Mike Gordon's restaurant around 7:15 p.m. She had been behind the wheel of their Cadillac Fleetwood and Joseph in the passenger seat. As they approached an intersection near Keystone Point, waiting for a red light, 2 men suddenly entered their vehicle. One of them pressed a pistol against the back of Frances's head, coercing her to drive to an empty lot in Sans Souci Estates. Amid the chaos that ensued, Joseph was struck in the face with the butt of a pistol. Frances herself endured blows from the attackers as they forcibly ripped off her jewelry. Ignoring the command not to turn around, she was struck again by one of the assailants seated in the back, momentarily losing consciousness. When she came to a few minutes later, the attackers had fled, leaving Joseph slumped against the car door with his head bleeding. Overwhelmed by fear and desperation, Frances pushed through the brambles, bushes, and sharp rocks until she reached the gas station, seeking refuge and desperately reaching out for help. As the police arrived at the designated location following Frances's desperate call, the reality of the situation unfolded before their eyes. There, parked as Frances had described, they discovered the lifeless body of Richard. His life had been abruptly cut short with 4 shots to the head. They also discovered 2 casings in the back of the vehicle. An investigation kicked into high gear. The authorities immediately delved into the intricate web of clues, searching for answers that would bring justice to Richard's demise. Among the avenues explored was the possibility of a mafia hit, but despite having a list of suspects, which included Frances herself, no concrete leads emerged from their efforts. Richard's funeral was a somber affair, a gathering of grieving hearts mourning the loss of a man taken too soon. As farewells were whispered and the earth embraced his remains, the investigation into his murder seemed to follow suit. Fading into the realm of unresolved mysteries, it became yet another cold case. The weight of unanswered questions loomed over the DiMare family. The absence of closure and justice left a void in their hearts, an ache that would forever accompany their memories of Richard. Yet as time marched on, hope remained, for in the realm of unsolved mysteries, even the coldest cases can be reawakened by a single spark, a new lead, or a breakthrough yet to come. But Richard's murder case would lie dormant for several decades, before receiving a jolt of renewed attention in 2019. The Miami-Dade Police Department, unwilling to let the truth remain buried, reopened the investigation. By May 2023, their tireless efforts bore fruit, unveiling a shocking revelation. Frances, Richard's own wife, was exposed as the sole perpetrator behind the heinous crime. So how did the truth come to light? Well, when police reopened the case, one of the first things they found was inconsistencies in Frances's testimony. The scrutiny of her statements by the police peeled back the layers of deception she had carefully constructed. Back in 1961, Frances claimed to have fled barefoot through the bushes and gravel after the attack, seeking help at the gas station. However, investigators discovered that Frances had no cuts or scrapes on her feet, despite her alleged ordeal on the gravel road. Adding to the doubt, her shoes were found neatly placed by the car. To test her account, a female deputy was asked to replicate Frances's alleged route, running barefoot through the same course. The deputy's feet suffered cuts and bruises, in stark contrast to Frances's unscathed soles. Another inconsistency emerged. Regarding Frances's claim of being pistol-whipped, medical professionals and Richard's family found no evidence of any injuries on her face following the incident. On the day of the funeral, her hair was being done at our home, and I stood over her, and I looked in her face, and there were no injuries whatsoever, Richard, Joseph's son, recalled. Now it doesn't end there. The two casings found in the back of the Cadillac on the day of the incident were linked to a gun that Joseph had bought for Frances months before. Surprisingly, it was Richard who provided the evidence. He revealed that he had fired the same gun into the pool months before his father's death and had held onto one of the casings. After careful examination, the firearms unit confirmed that the casings from the car matched the one Richard had fired into the pool. But there was more to unravel in this intricate tale. The investigators also discovered that Joseph and Frances's marriage was strained. Before his untimely death, Joseph had made a significant change to his will. In a surprising twist, he stipulated that his wife, who frequently resided in Ohio, had to be living at their home at the time of his death in order to inherit his wealth. Recognizing the deteriorating state of their relationship, Joseph traveled to Boston the week before the murder to discuss his plans with his family. They collectively agreed that the divorce was the necessary course of action, and Joseph returned to Miami with a resolute determination to initiate the legal proceedings. These findings shed light on the underlying issues that had plagued the couple. Investigators believed that Joseph's intent to sever ties with Frances was enough reason for her to carry out something as atrocious as taking his life. It was also revealed by Richard that following Joseph's death, Frances had been the beneficiary of a substantial $250,000 inheritance. Armed with this wealth of compelling evidence, investigators had pieced together a chilling conclusion. They postulated that the shooting occurred within the confines of the couple's own home, specifically in the garage just moments before Joseph and Frances were set to depart for dinner. The murder weapon, a pistol wielded by Frances, was thought to have been discarded along the route, beneath the bridges she crossed during her journey. Frances, they believed, had then driven the car to an isolated spot on Northeast 122nd Street in Sans Souci. Exiting the vehicle, she left behind her gloves and purse. She had removed her shoes and placed them neatly beside the car. With careful steps, she made her way towards the nearby gas station and only broke into a sprint at the last moment. Even though the truth had finally unraveled, exposing Frances as the mastermind behind Joseph's untimely demise, she would never face the consequences of her actions. This was because she had passed away in 2006 at the age of 82, forever escaping the grasp of the law. It was a bitter pill to swallow for those who had dedicated themselves to unraveling the truth.